we want is, you know, I think earlier they were having a discussion about the CIA, but uh, it's not as direct as we think it is. But we usually indirectly influence these nations to, and when I mean influence, whether it's local politics, local media, and I think we have an active role in making sure that anything that is has any semblance of socialism or communism fail from the get-go. So I think somebody earlier made a comment saying, "Well, it always fails on its own face." There are instances where it does fail on its own face, but it's for the same reason why capitalism also fails. It's because you have greedy people at the top of the food chain. And but anyways, I don't know where we're going. I hope I didn't add to the to derailing where we're going, but
No, it's fine. You just take it where you want to. It's not no big
yeah.
deal. People do that all the time. So that's what you want to talk about? Okay.
I mean there's a book that I think people should look at. It's called The Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Supposedly this guy was in the CIA, but was not directly, worked for a front company that did a lot of stuff in Indonesia and Latin America. But I think that's a good starting point for anybody that likes to kind of dig around.
I didn't mean to steer this into a socialism versus communism
I don't think
discussion.
it was you. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
it is absolutely fine. Hey, Grimace, thank you for being around. Capitalism is winning right now, reigning champ. Okay. Thank you for being around.
Yes.
But
Because they're more violent.
yeah, okay.
Like the Jakarta method.
So
someone if someone sells guns to a country and then someone does get hurt, what should happen to them? You know?
They should get medical care because they got hurt by a gun.
No, the person who sold the guns to the people who killed the people or raped the people or kidnapped the people, whatever bad thing they did to the people.
I don't think they should have any consequences. Like, they sold it; it was a fair deal. Everyone was happy. That's how capitalism works. And
I mean, sell guns to maniacs. Then what is the consequence if someone maybe allowed too many people to slip through the cracks? Let's say.
Okay, well, we're selling tanks and fucking planes and shit to Saudi Arabia, who's just like bombing Yemen, who's in the middle of famine, and not to mention COVID is also a thing there.
But she was talking about like it being vetted, though. That's like,
it being what?
Vetted, like
currently, I guess.
We know what Saudi Arabia is doing. Like, they're posting it online, being like, "My uncle's kidnapped me, and I can't leave my house just because I went outside without a hijab or whatever." You know, like, we know what the fuck's going on, and we're still selling the shit, and we're still like licking their boots.
I mean, like, I mean, so like, I guess sort of like with like selling like guns to Saudi Arabia keeps being. Well, I would say that the things that Saudi Arabia does, I probably agree with none of them. There is a good case to be made. Keep someone who sells like I don't know that exactly, but I know it's a ridiculous supply of the oils. Like, the world's oil supply comes from Saudi Arabia. America's oil supply, a portion of that comes from Saudi Arabia as well. And if you want to look at sort of like, I can say is that if you want to look at some of the biggest shocks to the world's economy, you wait till you see what when oil prices start spiking, and costs of transportation comes up, food comes up. You can't, like, economies start to like literally collapse the moment oil goes down. So while I don't know, while I don't think the US is perfect. There is good reason to keep the Saudis.
That's
to
because
not to sort of like push the Saudis on the opposite, onto the other side of the playing field, because they're going to get the guns, the weapons, the Saudi Arabia. They're going to get it from somewhere. They can get it from they've
It's
got
not
the
really
money.
our place, though.
Strongly dependent on coal and oil by design. A combination of the companies that own the wealth and the people in government who have legislated to death alternative energy options. I don't know who here is afraid of nuclear, but honestly, we're at a point where we could, with the type of technology that people are developing, in school and stuff, really thinking about those issues, we could probably solve the entire world's energy issues. We could possibly solve certain places' water issues with desalination plants. We could do a lot of the crap that differently, but because of legislation, we're stuck with whichever tools we're currently using, and no one's trying to change it.
I mean, like, even if we were to spend the next 10 years like switching to like nuclear and alternative forms of fuel generation, oil, like a ridiculous percentage of like cars on the road are like gas and oil. A ridiculous percentage of how we transport all our food is oil. It's like how do we transport goods across the sea? Oil. You start I don't know.
Scrap all the cars, make trains.
I don't think everyone can get to work by trains. I love the idea, I truly do, but I don't think that's feasible in the next 20 years.
I wanted to bring up a thing about the weapons. Like, obviously, if the weapons are coming from us, and we're the ones providing the weapons for violence, should we as a people not be held responsible for that and have to pay reparations to said people? And maybe people would stop allowing this if it increased taxes on us, the everyday people, every time that someone else suffers.
The reparations would just come out of the military budget and no one would fucking notice.
Yeah. Well, it's the federal government that's giving these corporations the AOK basically. So that's my point. Is like you can hold the federal government responsible because they have absolute power as to giving the corporation the okay to even make the sell.
If the company can afford to distribute the guns, then I hope that the company has a risk manager on deck and they take on the risk of some sort of human rights atrocities happening. I don't think that the entire American public should pay for it necessarily.
If
I don't know if
we're providing the weapons, I think we absolutely should.
maybe. But if it's private companies, I feel like that same company should be calculating the type of risk they're taking, and they should be prepared to take on some of that risk.
But I guess one thing is like we shouldn't put the blame on the corporation. We're responsible for allowing those guns to even be distributed in the first place.
Mm.
Yeah, this is a weird point for me because like I don't think anyone should have guns. But I think you need a knife to cut up your vegetables. But you can still kill someone with that knife. So like obviously like a gun can be a tool, even though most people who have guns, they're using it because they want the opportunity to shoot someone, like Revolt Rise said in the panel before. No, it's not the manufacturer's fault. They're just like
a standard
It's-
for the manufacturer
it's
to check, oh, are there going to be human rights violation? And then there are rights violations. I feel like they should have calculated the risk and said, okay, we thought we might be wrong. Okay, so we set something aside, you know?
Okay.
Hold on.
The other day in Norway.
So
But-
you're saying that you're saying that it's not at all the fault of a gun manufacturer as to where their product ends up, right? Like the person who is manufacturing something, something that could be a tool. You're saying it's a tool that could be used in any other in other fashions, right? Like not like to commit a crime. It's just a tool like anything else. That they shouldn't be responsible for where that ends up. Is that what you're saying, JJ?
I'm saying as long as there's like a reasonable doubt that it will be used responsibly, then that's totally fine.
Okay, sure.
Yeah,
right.
but
What
again,
about
I don't
then-
want
then-
anyone to have guns.
Sure, but pull back. What about
Mhm.
the makers of OxyContin? They were a manufacturer. Their drugs could be used for
They
medical
they
purposes.
incentivized. They gave the doctors bonuses just to prescribe it more.
You don't
Like-
think?
People aren't prescribing guns for anything. People get guns to hunt, or else they fantasize about murdering people.
Or they
No.
buy them, or they buy them in bulk and use them, like a cartel uses them, right? Or they gun manufacturers sell them to stores that like happen to be like the source where you trace the guns back, right? Of where lots of gangs get their guns, right? They don't, for some reason, it just always ends up in their hands, and
Right,
there's
this
just
is
a
the
few
big
stores
leaks.
that make sure that happens, right? And I mean, but
Okay,
the
hey,
gun
I appreciate
manufacturers
y'all.
shouldn't be concerned.
I'm not like stuck in a rut here. I'm willing to get your point. And like if a bunch of murder weapons end up coming from the same store, yeah, there's something wrong going on there. Maybe they shouldn't be selling guns anymore. Yeah, I'm with you.
Just like the government.
Pardon?
I said just like the government.
I mean, how are you supposed to evaluate some, like hypothetically, right? Say that you are allowed to like sell you're allowed to sell weapons in your company, in your own country. If you give them that, so how are you supposed to evaluate someone outside of like the legal framework that you're given? How are you supposed to are you supposed to take them out to dinner, find
Okay,
out
well,
whether they're actually crazy or not? I don't
in Canada, what you do is you the government calls your ex-partners and like people like around your friend group and stuff, and they're like, would it be dangerous for this guy to have a gun? And if any of them say yes, they look more into it, and you can get disqualified from owning a gun.
Sure, but that isn't like the gun. So like
Not
that's like a
100%,
check
yeah.
you would, if someone didn't do that, then essentially like if a gun store owner didn't like comply with that regulation, then he would be breaking the law. I don't see how so you're saying to me that this should be a part of the way people sell weapons, or are you saying that gun owners like need to take it upon themselves to like go and figure out like every person who comes into the store whether they are like worthy to take to like sell a gun to or not?
I don't think there is no situation where I think you should be able to go into a store and buy a gun and then leave. Like you should go into a store, say you want to buy a gun.
Sure, but say it was legal in a company. Say it was legal in like a country to like sell guns, and someone complied with and say is it part? Are you saying that what you said before is a part of like the legal framework? Are you just saying you wouldn't allow them to anyway? So this is just the minimum requirements as to what they should do.
No,
Is that
it
what you're
would
saying?
be part of a legal framework for sure. I'm not saying gun shop owners need to be more moral than anyone else.
Maybe they should be insured. I feel like there's probably a worthwhile risk assessment for certain types of high risk people.
I don't think they should be sued as long as like they go through the proper channels to like sell the weapon. Like if the person okay, like for example, in my city, like the biggest terrorist attack we ever had was like 11 people, and it was a guy who just rented a van and just like ran over a bunch of people on a sidewalk. Like there's only so much legislation you can do, right? Like, or go through a background check. No, it's stupid. You can buy a car with cash. You can steal
Why
a
not?
car.
Why
To
not?
like start taking like all this.
Why
different
not, Turk?
media
Yeah,
Why
that-
not
why
a background check for a car? Okay,
Why
well,
not? It's not
okay,
something.
if they
What
have
they know
vehicular
that the,
homicide in
criminal
their
justice
past, yeah,
company-
maybe. Fuck your
I
constitution. I'm not
mean, what?
proud of
I mean,
America.
what? Okay, hold on. So hypothetically, what in your mind would not allow? What in your mind would be like? Okay, you can't drive a car now. Like, what would be like the prerequisite for that for you?
You beat on girls? I don't know.
No,
I mean,
no.
but
I mean, I'm sure all the best NASCAR drivers beat on girls. All right.
I feel like somebody out there loves data enough that somebody could do a worthwhile risk assessment that's going to catch enough people that will all be like, oh, well, you can't get them all. You know?
And who? You can't brandish them. You can't be like, I'm gonna shoot you, but you can be like, look at my gun. It's very lovely. So grab your gun. I want to see what it looks like. Kirk obviously doesn't have any.
Mhm.
Oh, right at the hand. Oh God, America, amazing.
You could definitely put additional restrictions against someone buying a firearm, because right now, if you're going to go ahead and if you're going to buy a NFA registered item, you have to get yourself fingerprinted, which complies with Federal Bureau of Investigation, fingerprinting standards. You have to actually get it certified through your local, it's either your county sheriff or your fire marshal, all that other stuff. So like there are other legal standards that are in place that you can go through in order to get those types of items. So there wouldn't be a reason why you couldn't do that, other than the fact that it's a Second Amendment right and all that stuff. So who cares about that, right?
Okay.
I don't want my mother to have a weapon, to be personally honest. I
But,
think asking your family and friends might be a good idea, because people who know you
Mhm.
see the craziest shit you did.
Okay, well, I wanted to bring up an example with the vehicle thing. Okay, if someone has a reoccurring theme of drunk driving incidents, we only take away their license. Why not just take away their vehicle? Like, taking away the license doesn't take away their ability to drive that vehicle. So if a person keeps on doing DUIs, they're clearly a danger to the public. It should not be allowed to own a vehicle.
I mean,
It's almost as if the person's the problem and not the vehicle.
And in the current system, if you are a shitty driver, you keep speeding and getting drunk and shit, you're more likely to get a ticket than you are to get an actual point on your license.
Yeah, so why not just take away the vehicle?
I mean, there are certain
Care about
instances
money.
where
Hello?
a
Am I still
DUI
live
or a
right now? What's
DWI
going on here?
person gets their vehicle towed or possessed by the local municipality, and that happens. It's not like they become a perpetrator in their
oh
house.
shit, you guys have
They-
been talking.
they pull their
Okay,
stuff
I'm
away.
live. All right.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Leader. Sorry, 1 second. Leader, can you not hear us? Leader, we can't hear you now. Well, you're muted, obviously. Oh my god. Yeah. All right. Well, keep going. I'm sorry, JJ.
But I was saying that if we take their car away, we should just take away all their rights to own like a vehicle as private property. Period.
The thing about the DUI thing, like taking your car away, is you can give your car to someone else and they can use it safely. But like giving your gun to someone else, like that's a thing. Like that's a thing that is made for shooting people. Cars
Or defending
most of the time.
yourself perspective.
okay, defending yourself, sure, whatever. So cars are also for defending yourself when you're in a demolition derby.
Or just driving from point A to point B. I mean, you don't gotta overthink it too much.
I mean, they have a right to them until they
more people
lose that right.
figure out who should be adjudicated as mentally defective. Like maybe we should do more research on people. We should start paying more attention to people and individuals, especially those who self-isolate and do crazy shit like kill a bunch of people. And do just an assessment on the individuals. That way, like the little girl who's in the city full of guns already can keep her firearm next to her and not be kidnapped or sex trafficked.
No,
But how do you prove-
that's
how
not
do you
that's
prove-
not what happens. No, like if someone pulls a gun on you and you go for your gun, they're gonna shoot you. Like that's not how having a gun works. You're not actually gonna defend yourself with a gun.
Okay, so some people successfully defend themselves with guns. I think people should probably take a class on having a gun if they have a gun. The thing about the gun is instead of allowing some dude to run up on you and overpower you, because how are you going to defend yourself in that case?
How are you gonna go for a gun if he's already like holding your arms back behind you or whatever? You know, come on.
I don't let people get close to me, but I mean, other people might
Okay.
live a different lifestyle.
I think carbon monoxide might be getting close to you.
I just
Yeah, I don't.
That's just me. I live in a city full of crazy people. I just don't be letting people get that close to me. I see people on the street. I know how to talk to people in a well enough way to get out safely usually. But honestly, I've met the person who's got a trench coat on and a gun, and I'm like uncomfortable with the fact that they're the only one with a firearm in this room, or the fucking tweaker who walks into my store with a gun, and I'm like, get the fuck out, and all I can do is say, get the fuck out. Like,
Don't you wish that guy didn't have a gun then?
I mean, he some sort of risk assessment.
No, that's no. The bad guys having a gun is not a problem. Okay.
He definitely was.
Oh,
I give him a mace.
fines.
Be more focusing on the underlying issues that cause crime, because like there are a lot of fucking systemic issues, whether it be systemic racism, whether it be systemic homophobia, whether it be systemic poverty. You know, there are so many like issues that I think need to be addressed before we can honestly even have the gun conversation. As for owning a gun, it's clear. I mean, we have a constitution. I mean, we're living in a legal society that has a law, and I think like we should be using that to our advantage, and using guns as a way, not necessarily as a way to rebel against anything necessarily, but as something to like defend communities, to defend people, in and I think it's really like telling of how liberals will approach this, because they will never really make the jump to systemic issues, but instead they will just try to do this blanket pig in a fucking blanket pig response to these issues, and it just doesn't seem very rational to me. So I think we should like more focus on the systemic issues rather than focusing on like guns as an item, because guns as an item is what it is. It's just it's an object. Like people use objects, and there are sociological reasons people use objects.
Also, want to say rape, I feel like transcends poverty. Like some crimes do transcend poverty, so we have to think deeply about human beings, not just necessarily like all the different little issues that make them feel desperate. But that is also super important.
So for the instance of that, already illegal action, how do you address that? Would you rather arm someone that can defend themselves and be able to take care of the perpetrator that's assaulting them, or would you rather do X, Y, and Z in order to address the systemic problems or whatever? Which was the more prudent and probably fruitful
X, Y, and
thing
Z.
for
The other one
person?
ends up in murder. Are you kidding me?
It's not murder when someone's
Positive.
assaulting you. It's called self-defense.
What is it called?
I mean, I defer to the
Self-defense is the act of killing
Constitution.
someone. Okay.
It's
I mean,
called defending
interesting.
yourself from a
I think he
violent
was
act
asking
when
me. I don't know.
unappropriate
Sorry.
force is put against you.
I mean,
Vines?
so hyper.
Vines, want to respond?
I was just gonna respond to like whether or not you should use or we should like be pushing for guns rather than pushing for the X, Y, and Z. I think like not only can we do both, but I think right now, considering the Constitution, considering the Second Amendment, considering the Supreme Court cases, we should be okay with guns. Like guns are a part of this fucking culture. Like I'm not even trying to like skirt the debate and be like, oh, it's only these systemic issues. I'm also saying like we have a constitution, if we're gonna have this constitution, if we're gonna have this state, use the best parts of it, because honestly the Second Amendment is a good part of it, to be honest. So that's my answer to that, the Turk.
I have a question for JJ.
So, homie.
So, you think basically you claim that even self-defense is still murder. So, in the case of a woman getting raped, do you still think it's murder for a rape victim to literally defend herself and kill her assailant?
Okay. I was called out on that, and I looked it up, and murder is like the unlawful or unjustifiable killing of another person. So
That might be homicide.
yeah, the unlawful killing of another human without justification or valid excuse, especially the unlawful killing of another human with malice. So I don't know if there's malice. If
So the
yeah,
other one would
maybe
be
it's
killing
not.
someone unlawfully and with premeditation. So which
Yeah,
definition?
no, you got me. You absolutely got me. But I still think
we
like
have
if I
laws in this
if I
country
had
for
to
a
kill
reason, if you're not going to adhere
this
to the
country, I'm
law
not in your fucking
definition,
country. All right.
then stop having an opinion of the conversation, dude.
Well,
I can't believe my twin is going against me like this. Why is my twin going against me?
I asked him specifically the question.
Okay. Okay, fine. Killing of a human, homicide, we'll call it, is similar to murder. And I think if you kill someone, even if it was justified, you're gonna live with that for years and years, right? Like that's still gonna be bad on you. It's gonna hurt the other people's families. It's gonna, it's gonna
But
cause
would
a
you allow someone to rape yourself? Would you allow someone to rape yourself if you had a handgun in your pocket?
No, I would homicide them. Homo as in human,
So
side as in kill.
Would you rather
Yeah.
result of that be called self-defense, or would you rather that be considered murder?
It would be murder.
So you're
It's
cool
not-
with
it's not murder.
federal penitentiary for capital murder?
Huh?
If that incident happened and
You said
your
you were
definition was
taking
put into
onus in court.
place, you would be cool with, if you were in like Kentucky, going to the
I would not be cool if I was
the
in
death
Kentucky.
house and being put on death row.
Why would
by
I be
your
cool with
By
that?
your definition, that action would be called murder, and that'd be like capital murder, and you'd be put on death row, man.
Wants
Well,
killing to have
I'm against capital punishment. But
Well,
that's the
Well,
next
if you're in
topic.
Kentucky, that's the law of the land, and that's where you're going, man.
Well,
Sorry.
Well, I'll never find myself in Kentucky.
Well, but the question is that basically there is justifiable killing, and it's not homicide or murder. A rape victim can kill her rapist with absolute malice and not give a fuck. Fuck that person's family. What seriously?
Yeah. Sorry, I got lost in the semantics. Got lost in the semantics and the laughing. Yeah, no, I didn't misspoke. I didn't misspeak. I was just wrong. Yeah. Thanks for your charitability, though.
Okay, so we all agree that killing a rapist is not.
Okay, so guns, right? You don't think that gun manufacturers can ever have any liability for how their products are used or whose hands they get into? Why you have to have ill intention? Why you have to have ill intention?
Oh,
it could be negligent and still cause harm, right? Yeah, but guns are used for killing, right? They use for like whether it's defensible or not, they're used for killing. Right? That's the main purpose of a gun. So you can assume
I mean, also
that,
hunting.
which is still killing. But in any case, oh, of course they are. Of course they are. They actually are. So when I didn't say they did, I didn't say that. I said just for killing, right? Like
But
it's used.
the point
Sorry,
he's getting at is called intent, and that's the entire crux of the discussion. You
no,
can't
not intent.
right? If someone intends to go and commit a homicide, that's called murder. If someone intends to use it in self-defense, that's called self-defense, and they get special legal protections, right? As a manufacturer, you don't intend for these to go into murder instances. That's not on the manufacturer's instance. That's on the end user.
Well,
if they sold their guns, if they sold their guns at a playground, right? Well, they don't intend for kids to get their hands on them. It was just at a playground. There were kids around, right? And
your argument's just dumb.
Ryan, what rich kids do you know that can afford a gun?
Oh my God!
Come on.
Shut up.
There's so much legal stuff going on with manufacturers of firearms. They can only sell their firearms to legal either resellers that have federal licenses that go through their own process, or they go to other contractors and other companies that go and sell these other things. So, like Black American Made said, unless there's some other paper trail that can be tracked that pinpoints that there was a malicious intent to sell these to an unauthorized person, that's a very steep legal ground.
Okay, this is why I was relating it to the OxyContin situation, right? Because there were pill farms or pill mills. I think this was the term. Pill mills, right? You can only sell the pills. Right? You can't just sell those pills anywhere, right? You can't just give them to anyone. But they gave them to these, or they sold them to these mills where so many pills are being sold, like it outstripped like the local population, right? Like there's literally no way. There's like no physical way that the local population could have been using those guns. Clearly, something was going on, but they let it happen any which way. People here can see. People here can see. No problem. People here, I think, would agree that the actions of those pharmaceutical companies, right, were were wrong, right? And at the very least, even if whether they attended it or not, were negligent, allowing an endless amount of people to be addicted. Like, clearly, with prescriptions, like you would like doing your due diligence, you would look into these things. Like, why are so many pills being sold at this area where like not even metropolitan areas, just like random fucking rural areas? How are these pills being sold? Right? You know your product is addictive, so you will look into these things, and not looking into them, right? Like is just as problematic. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that, but it is a problem. Can we agree on that? Can we agree on that?
Problem.
Yes.
Okay,
And luckily, there's a
Great.
federal agency
So-
that's related to that called the DEA.
Whoa.
I don't know what that has to do with anything, but anyway. So back to it. If there are shops, right, where a lot of weapons are coming, where you could trace weapons back to, right, like they end up in the hands of gang members, right? There's one shop where just somehow these weapons just keep disappearing, or maybe they're just actually sold, one or the other, and they end up in the hands of these gang members, right? Like, wouldn't you, as a manufacturer, wouldn't you want them to look into this? Like, why? I mean, it's not our attention,
But
not their
how is
attention,
the-
apparently.
I
How is
I-
the manufacturer supposed to know these things? And like,
If we can
like-
quantify the amount of people who are being harmed by certain guns coming from certain areas, then why should it be on the American public to deal with the fallout of their families, all the different money and stuff that's going to end up being spent by the state? Why should it be on the state rather than, why shouldn't the companies take any burden, like zero burden? You know what I mean?
I mean, if you have a problem with like the sort of like the way guns are used in society, then I would say make the guns themselves illegal. I don't think that there is a good argument to say that the manufacturers are responsible for for guns getting stolen from like suppliers down the line. That's not even like their fault. They can't even get into it. I don't even think they would have like the necessary like the ability to be able to see where these guns are being stolen from.
That's
So-
a great point. Yeah, like all the suicide bombs that happen, like aren't they done with like commercially available like C4 or whatever? Like obviously most of that's going to be is going to be used for like mining and shit, right? And like getting gravel.
Well,
You can't exactly go and
I've
buy
been,
C4.
I've been trying to
grocery
make this
store.
point for like 5 minutes. Let me just say this real quick, and I'll let it continue. A gun manufacturer can sell a gun to a person without the intent of selling them a defective product, and then that person goes and uses said gun, and it blows up in their face. But yet they can still sue that company for damages because they sold them a defective product and they were injured. So why can't the same be applied?
So
Well, that
because
makes sense though.
it's
If I
not a
get a
product of-
car,
It's not. It's
if
not,
I get a
it's not
car,
part of
if
the
I get a Ford
manufacturing
Pinto and I get
process.
rear-ended and my car explodes, I can sue you. So I can sue Ford because they've made a shitty car. But if I get a Ford Pinto and I run some like a parade of babies over, that's my fault, not Ford's fault.
Yeah,
All
this
right, sure. But
Okay,
I mean,
explode.
you're kind of
Things
are so
conflating
soft.
here.
So-
You're conflating like you guys are conflating the ability like
Who
a
has to pay for it?
manufacturing
It's called
issue with
intent.
the product with someone actually going out there and sort of committing like acts of violence with your product. These are
It's
two
called
completely different
intent.
things.
So hold on. Okay, well, let's do this. All right. So once again, I gotta nail this down. Do you think the action of like Purdue Pharma, selling OxyContin, to pill mills, right, and getting fucking a generation of individuals addicted, right, whether they intended to or not, they were selling it to pill mills, right? Is that a problem? Selling it to a distributor that clearly is doing something wrong, right? Like clearly something must be going on, and they just never even bothered to look into it. Do you agree that was a problem? Just that.
Manufacturing the pills.
That's all I'm asking. I'm not asking anything else.
Yes.
That question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Manufacturing the pills and
Alright.
giving them
Can I give you
Yes or no? Yes or no?
Yeah,
yes
Neil,
or no? Is it a
you're
problem or not?
absolutely right in this
No, it's not a
situation,
problem.
and I'm
So
going on
Purdue
this
should
exact
not.
point.
Hold on, JJ. So Purdue should not be
That's
held
not the
accountable.
problem.
That's not their problem.
Their problem is that they were giving money to doctors to like overprescribe.
No, it wasn't just these pill mills that could do it just by themselves. They didn't. Those doctors didn't need an incentive for people to come in and keep buying from them. They didn't need an incentive to do that. For all those people to like they were drug dealers. They were honest to God drug dealers. They didn't need that incentive themselves. So beyond that, if there's a pill mill, is that a problem for the manufacturer? Answer from everyone. Go ahead, Bam. So you're saying that? Sorry, I lost you there for a second. My fault. Are you saying the Purdue Pharma is not responsible? I mean, there was. That's why they're paying billions of dollars in damages. Hold on. So why they're paying $1 billion in damages right now? And then okay, but hold on, that doesn't sound like negligence at all to you. When they had the evidence, right? They had the evidence, right, through their distribution network as to what was happening. They knew the situation. They knew that there was these were being sold in rural areas. Hold on, I gotta. All right, motherfucker. I literally just asked you to stop spamming me. Go fuck off, please. Thank you. Bye. But yeah, sorry, I got distracted. But like they knew the situation and didn't do anything, right? So just looking at fact pattern, just as I present to you, whether you know the case or not, you think that there's no culpability at all. Okay, culpability, got it. All right, we got that far then. All right, fines.
Like
So I actually don't. I'm not ready. My bad. Did I accidentally raise my hand?
No, I was just
Sorry.
asking for everyone to talk on this. All right, that's fine. Let's go on. I'm gonna. Don't worry. Don't need to raise your hand. I told you I want everyone to answer. So backwards, man.
Well, I agree. My grandmother was a heavy pill addict. She had a big bag of all these different pharmaceuticals that weighed like 25 fucking pounds. And she would just go to doctor after doctor using her insurance to basically get all these different drugs for free and then pop them like candy. And I'm pretty sure that she OD'd on her medicine multiple times.
That's how I want to go too.
Yep.
What? Hon, what?
That's how I want to go too.
She OD'd. Hon, he just said his grandma OD'd on her meds.
Yeah, like multiple times.
And JJ, you say that's how you want to. That's pretty messed up, dude. Like,
Yeah,
Dude, my
that's
like
grandparents
really
went
fucked up.
in pain and like, being like,
Yeah, dude, that's pretty
She
fucked
didn't
up.
say
right?
anything. She didn't say anything. He didn't say anything like that. He just said that his grandma had like a.
It's cool. So
He
some
said
people-
overdosed on. Like, all right, whatever, dude. That's pretty fucked up. All right, we'll move on. Fines. You want to say?
it's all good.
Manufacturers should be held responsible for the violence that their guns produce. I honestly think that I think that if gun manufacturers are deliberately making guns in such a way that it kills that it isn't being used for self-defense, then I think yes, they should be held responsible. But I think for like the gun manufacturers that we would just have to look gun by gun basis.
All right, fine. So what we're talking about is like negligence, right? Negligence in selling. So I'm asking, right? Purdue Pharma, maker of Oxycontin, selling the pill mills all over. I'm trying to draw a parallel here. Selling to pill mills all over the country that were just selling pills all over the place, right? Like they were like selling an inordinate amount of pills that couldn't possibly make sense within the context of their business.
I would say legally. I would say that's an amazing legal argument because that is establishing some precedent that we have to like legally sift through. Because this is a legal argument. This is a legal discussion. Like you have to like look at the precedent. So I'm willing to I'm like willing to agree with that, Prime. Like
okay,
that is a good precedent to draw from.
Okay, then we'll go to we'll get off to everyone. So, Lady, what do you want to say?
So currently, if you had a kid who was taking child Tylenol between the years of 2014 and 2020, you're able to file some information and possibly get a portion of a settlement, which makes me feel like currently we don't hold gun manufacturers to the same standard that we hold, drug manufacturers, which seems a bit off. And personally, I know someone who passed away from someone who was a felon who got an ill-gotten gun and shot them. And the state is the one who took responsibility for that. They paid the children and then the baby mothers. I don't know why. So in my opinion, that means right now, lots and lots of people are out being hurt by guns, sometimes ill-gotten guns. Maybe there's like certain people distributing a lot of ill-gotten guns. I'm not sure. We should probably research it. But the state's paying for it. I'm paying for it. You're paying for it. If someone shoots your cousin, you're paying for it, apparently.
Okay. So is the answer yes? That the big pharma would be?
For me, yeah, there should be a certain level of responsibility of a company that's distributing something that causes risk, and they should be in charge of like quantifying the risk, and they should also be at least in part in charge of taking on the actual risk.
Thank you, Leader.
Because that is a big risk. That's a massive risk.
With this pill mills and big pharma thing, I think what sets it apart for me is that doctors were prescribing these addictive medications. They were not like I believe they were being misinforming whether they were addictive or not, something to that effect, and pushing these drugs onto people who didn't need it. That sort of like to me says that the problem is no longer this is like they are pushing a product which is they're pushing the product onto a consumer which they don't need, and this sort of like tracks it back to who's selling it. This seems like this seems to me like a problem with like the way that they're selling the products and sort of like the chain of management going down. It clearly sort of it isn't a they're not using the product as intended. They're prescribing the consumer wrong sort of like information about the product, and they're sort of like where there is like a duty of care and trust between a doctor and patient, they're subverting that with sort of money and sort of like incentives to like sell people to sort of give people like prescriptions which they don't need. This is a clear case to me in which, you should throw the book as basically as hard as you possibly can at anyone that seems responsible for that kind of shit. But I don't personally see how like if gun manufacturers are breaking laws, of laws of distribution, then yes, throw the book at them. Are they if gun manufacturers if it was found out that they were sort of improperly distributing their guns or being negligent to their obligations as to who they should sell it to, throw the book at them. Should gun manufacturers be responsible for the legal and the legal manufacturing of the guns that they're legally entitled to? No, thank you. That's where I sit on this.
Sure.
Yeah, so in the specific instance you gave, Prime, I believe that manufacturers have a interest in how their products are being sold and who they're being sold to and how it's being distributed. But as you know, the supply chain is a huge net, and it's very difficult to track each individual person.
They did know, but they didn't know.
And that's fine, and it goes into my response.
Okay.
Luckily, there are federal agencies that go and track some of these things. The DEA is one of those, and they actually go and say, this person should have received so much of certain product. Who did they send it to? Is there a pattern here? They should be working with the manufacturers in order to say, hey, manufacturers, stop selling to this person. But then also going and prosecuting the person that was being sold to the fullest extent. There's a working relationship between the manufacturer and the distributor, as well as the federal agency. And if you relate this back to guns, if you go to FFLs, yes, they are equally liable to both the manufacturer they purchase from, the people they sell it to, as well as the federal government that gives them the license. Sorry. And the ATF has every opportunity to renounce the license that they were given, and they should be fined and prosecuted accordingly. All of that stuff should already be in place, and we should be funding those processes more in order to execute the law as it currently stands.
Okay. Go ahead, Kobe.
What's up? Yes. Okay. Guns are a pretty unique instrument. I think that is kind of silly to compare them to fertilizer that you can make a bomb out of. What would have to be done to prove them negligent? I don't know. Seems like we did it. Well, as it was brought up earlier with Purdue, we did it with Purdue and these kind of companies. We also did it with tobacco companies. I put a link into a Wikipedia for a settlement between the federal government and the 5 biggest tobacco companies. Tobacco companies have to pay a perpetual annual payment to 48 states. They have to help fund the Truth Initiative that advocates against them. We do a ton of shit. It's so obvious. Going forward, guns are bad in America. They don't do what we want them to do. They don't really defend people. There are very few defensive gun uses. I think I was just looking it up. I think it was 7% of all gun homicides are defensive gun uses. It's very, very small, and most of those are police officers, which I don't even know. Maybe you could probably argue a lot of those are probably not even defensive gun uses, they're police officers. But anyways, I don't know, a gun is a suicide machine in America, a handgun specifically. It's just that is the biggest use of it. It's going to be used to sit in someone's dresser and maybe kill them one day, or maybe just never be used ever, or be used in a domestic violence dispute, or be used because you got mad at your Uncle Earl for taking too many of the Bud Lights. There's a lot of things that could happen to lead to this. And it's just obvious. Gun manufacturers know what they're doing. Gun manufacturers are one of the reasons that we have such a toxic gun culture that ties masculinity to guns. Because if a guy thinks he's buying his dick when he goes to the fucking gun store, he'll spend more money. That's just the truth. Gun manufacturers started the myth that women need to have guns to protect themselves from violence. Again, defensive gun uses are not that common. It is far more likely that you're going to use a gun on yourself than you're going to use it on an attacker. It is gun manufacturers that want women to think that they need to have their fucking Colt 45 with the fucking ACOG sight so they can fight the evil attacker that's good them. Guns are not good. Gun manufacturers are not good. If we're going to have guns in this country, they should be much less. They should not be. I think that we should all agree consumerism is not good, and consumerism combined with deadly weapons is horrible. I'm sorry. This is so off. It's very obvious to me. So yes, that's a very long way to say yes to Prime.
Okay. So, and all right. Apparently, not all agree on this line of thinking, which is amazing. But then I'll finally just take us where I was going with this. So, the city of Chicago. How is this article? Actually, I have no idea. It doesn't have a year on it. Anyway, the city of Chicago is suing an Indiana gun store, accusing it of putting guns into the hands of gang members and felons. Attorneys claim that between 2009 and 2016, 850 guns that were purchased at Westford Sports in Gary, Indiana, I guess, were recovered at crime scenes in Chicago. The lawsuit claims that Gary Gun Store is the largest out-of-state supplier of legal guns that end up on Chicago streets. Mayor Lightfoot said research by the city and federal law enforcement partners has shown Westford Sports is selling. Now put this article in chat later on. Selling thousands of crime guns every year. The time for us to stop and ask them to do better and make sure they're not selling to straw purchases, do what they're required to do as a federally licensed gun dealer is over, Lightfoot said. We've tried that. It hasn't worked, so now we're in litigation with them. So it says in a 42-page complaint filed Monday in Cook County, the city of Chicago accused Westford Sports of being a trusted source for gun traffickers. It also claims the store looked the other way when selling similar guns to the same people repeatedly, and even falsified transaction forms, breaking federal gun laws. And it goes on from there.
Okay, Gary was like a union town, and the union fucking stabbed them in the back, and all of a sudden they went from like 200,000 people to 50,000 people, and they have no money to keep up their infrastructure. So it's one of the poorest, most dangerous neighborhoods in America. Not anymore, actually, because people have other cities have gotten worse. My original point was to be, okay, think about when the opiate crisis got really bad. It's when opiates got really cheap in America, because it was all American-made shit, and the CIA stopped trading the opium from Afghanistan into America, and they just sent it into the rest of the Middle East.
Sorry, what does that have to do with what I just said? But like, what I was trying to go for is that this is an example. People were asking me, right? Well, how will we know? How will we know if these guns, like, how can we trace these guns, right? Like, how is that a possibility? How would anyone know where these guns are coming from? Well, yeah, the federal investigators can actually know. Like, hold on,
Gary, Indiana has no.
Got federal investigators.
Afraid of the truth.
Oh my God! Stop! Federal investigators can trace these guns. They do it all the goddamn time. They've traced these guns multiple times to this one manufacturer, or sorry, one retail store that have been selling this, right? Like, if that's the case, if this information is available, right, and it wasn't like the first time that they've been aware of this. This is not like a unique case that I'm bringing up, right? That gun stores that engage in this behavior are clearly selling to suspicious characters, right, and not doing their duties, or maybe even straight up breaking the law, right? Like, if that knowledge is available, and manufacturers don't stop selling to them, are taking the profits of those individuals, are they not responsible for where their weapons end up?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I've got a question. Is this a manufacturer or a distributor?
Distributor. So yeah.
Oh, well, yeah.
The store. Yeah. So the link is in chat. So in the VC chat, so you can take a look at that yourself too.
Okay, yeah, sure. I would say that absolutely. Like, these people are clearly in breach of the law, and take away their ability if they want to go around and sell to people who don't have licenses.
Who are these people?
I'm talking about the manufacturer.
Sort of specific, the manufacturer. Sorry, the distributor.
No, he wants to hold the manufacturer accountable for selling guns to the distributor.
No, he was saying the distributor should be held accountable.
No, Prime is talking about the manufacturer.
No. Yes. So I said the distributor is a problem, right? They are a problem, but who's also a problem are the manufacturers. This is why I made the analogy with Purdue. Purdue being the manufacturer, those pill mills, right? Those doctors, those drug pushers being the distributors, right? If Purdue is responsible for being at the very least negligent, and they were beyond negligent, they were actually hiding that data, right? But one way or the other, if they, even if they were simply negligent and allowed an endless amount of pills to throw through these pill mills, then on the other side, if we know that hundreds of guns are ending up on the streets using in the commission of crimes, right? Then those gun manufacturers should also have a certain level of liability for that as well. That's what the parallel I'm drawing here.
And I want to answer that directly.
Like, with gun manufacturers, so like, for the manufacturers to have a complete understanding of what distributors are selling, wouldn't they need personal information about, like, the individual gun buyers that they're selling to be able to make this call?
That's handled at the federal level.
Just thinking about this, wouldn't that sort of like be the sort of like, wouldn't you have to do that to sort of even get the sort of information needed to sort of make that call in the first place?
Yeah,
No.
I think that the issue would be, I think the issue would be like more directly related to like the legal channels, like keeping them licensed. Like if you are a legally licensed gun store able to buy guns, then I as a manufacturer should legally be able to sell you guns. I don't believe that I have any accountability. Like if anything, you should like the reason why I don't like I'll answer the pharma question, but I don't think it's a fair enough comparison. Like is because you're specifically like it's weird when you're dealing with. I don't know. It's just different. Here's I think is a better example. Would you hold accountable like let's say there's some company that sells like kitchenware and that's what they sell. They sell pots, pans, forks, spoons, knives, whatever. And they like recently had a new knife go on the market, and this knife intentioned just like for a weapon isn't just like for a AR-15 isn't for unlawful killing. Neither of these weapons have the exact same like liability when it comes to unlawful killing. Neither of them are supposed to be used in a manner. But if housewives one had like a spike in killing sprees, like stabbing their husband with this house knife, would you hold that that kitchen company accountable and for that, like just because like the spike happened? And I don't think you can. Like I don't consider that negligent. Even if you knew like there was a spike of like housewife murders in the city, I don't think you could hold like the cooking company accountable for that, because that's not what their product was intended use was. And all they could do was legally sell to the manufacturer. All they did was like everything they did followed through the legal channels. So yeah.
Go ahead, Kobe. And then Fines.
I'm sorry, I was reading something while people were talking. This is kind of something that I think was kind of brought up on the panel and also in the chat. Just it looks like about like 40% of all guns that are used are coming from like underground, which includes like illegal purchases, like a straw purchase. They're including that in underground. So 40% is like the initial purchase is illegal.
40% of what? Sorry.
I'm sorry. 40% of the source. Like I'm looking at the source of where guns that are used in crimes come from. If you look at all the gun crimes in a year, the source of those guns, 40% is going to come from burglary, from a retail source, like you steal it from an underground market, or from a family or friend that like a straw purchase.
Yeah, and that's just like a more that's just a better point for gun control. How is it not?
I mean, a straw purchase is already illegal.
Yeah, I don't really think
a person. It's also illegal from a seller's perspective. So both individuals would be held liable in that instance. If you want to somehow make a straw purchase also applicable to the manufacturer, you then have to prove that the manufacturer knowingly sold a firearm to a distributor who knowingly sold it to an individual who knowingly straw purchased it to another individual.
Here would be my argument, just very quick. I know other people want to get in, so I'll just be very, very quick. One of the arguments that's made against like tobacco companies is tobacco companies said like, well, listen, we say in our package you shouldn't smoke too much. We say all the things. It's people are making a rational decision. But the argument is like, well, the same thing with Purdue. If you're producing enough, OxyContin that everybody, including their children, could have a whole bottle a month or whatever the statistic is, or if you're producing all these guns, you should be able to have the forethought that like a significant percentage of the guns that you have, the handguns that Colt produces, are going to be ending up in very unsavory places. And I think that is a reasonable to at least investigate, holding some sort of accountability there.
I completely disagree, because like even if say like an individual an individual manufacturer were to like cut back production because they thought that a percentage of their guns were being like used in illicit deals, then what would happen is they would just be opening up essentially the market or their competitors would sell them the guns. I don't think that argument stands up very well in terms of like who's you should manufacture or not.
Okay, Fines. Fines. Says one say first.
I was gonna say that like another big thing to note here is that this is an ongoing lawsuit. I think that this like specific lawsuit, as it goes on, we could find more evidence to like suggest that there's more liability. From what it seems, based on the accusation and based on like the evidence that Lori Lightfoot, the mayor of Chicago, has been presenting, it seems like there is some problems with the distributor. But to broaden this out a little bit, given that this is happening in like one of the biggest cities of the country, given that this is happening in a in a place where, you know, this could be easily replicated across the entire country, I really do think that we need to be more careful
My bad, y'all.
at making sure that distributors are looked at. And you know, as the evidence comes in for this case, we'll be looking at it, maybe if it's a like big national case that's worth looking at. But to broaden it out, I think like city governments probably should be holding these distributors accountable, because like like how could you not? Like, it's literally going to illegal criminal organizations. Like, you have to look into this. You have to follow the money. You have to follow the evidence wherever it finds you. So,
and that's currently happening in this particular case. The federal government, as well as the local municipality, are going through investigations. They've found the vendor that is selling the firearms. They've tracked various firearms to violent activities. It's been traced back. So from the distributor's level, that is being taken care of in this particular instance. The problem is you're now trying to make the manufacturer liable for something they didn't intend to do. Back to intent.
no, I said that if we find more evidence... wait, I actually didn't say this, but what I was going to say, and I didn't say it, and I'm sorry, but what I was going to say is that we have to make sure to look at the trail to the manufacturers. So what I'm saying is that, like, in this specific case, we should be receiving any evidence that might point us towards the manufacturers, and wherever that evidence leads us, then we have to be more careful in all cities about where the evidence from the distributors is leading us to the manufacturers. Because again, like what Prime was saying about the whole pill mill shit, he wasn't just saying words. He was literally like making the argument that like these pill mills were where we started, right? We started at the pill mills and then we got to the Purdue, I'm pretty sure. We didn't just like find Johnson and or whatever fucking company it was and find them with their pants down and seeing them like being guilty of a crime. No, we had to start at the pill mills the same way that we should be starting at the distributors, and then from there we lead it to the money, and then from there we lead it onward to who's really maybe responsible. So I think that is really the best analogy here is the pill mills. Like that just seems to me like a literal rational argument, like legally, like literally in every single way. Like that's a rational like way to look at this.
It's different because it's like because pills don't have like the pill, like it will be the pills being used, like they're being abused, but the pills are being used like in their intended purpose. Like pills being used in their intended purpose can have negative.
No, they're not.
Wait, I'm saying that pills being used in their intended purpose can still account for like negative consequences. I'm saying that the reason why I made the knife analogy, because like guns in their intended purpose would never be used for a wrongful killing. Like that's not part of their intended purpose. Like that's not.
And the intended purpose of any pill, any medication,
You can still die. You can take your proper dosage.
What's a hollow point? What's a hollow point for?
Like I don't understand why you're not getting this.
Black American made is that at least Prime has actual legal precedents to fucking look at. Like when we're talking about like knives and whether or not they're being used, we don't like, dude, opioids kill way more many people than knives probably ever do.
And
the same with guns.
Kill more
like,
people than rifles.
That's like an important fact. Like
knives kill more people than rifles.
Organizations. And we're dealing with criminal organizations who are abusing.
Kill more people than rifles.
You keep saying rifles. I don't even. I'm not looking at this. I'm assuming.
Can you submit that evidence in the VC chat? I'd like to look at it.
Yeah, who kills more people here in America? Like scythes, knives, nunchucks, all put together, or guns?
Probably
from-
not guns.
If we're
Honestly,
talk-
guns
if
is
we're
probably
talking
really
like
low.
homicide,
Well,
murder,
no,
not
obviously I know others.
suicides.
I mean,
Yes, knives kill more people than rifles.
well, specifically rifles.
mean-
Rifles make up a very small amount of the gun deaths every year.
I
handguns-
mean,
I don't think we're
trying
talking
to
about
so
suicide
I
here.
just
We're
wanna
talking
throw-
about murders.
I just want to throw this one. I want to throw this one out there just to throw in a 180. I mean, so like, when you got rid of guns from Australia, the homicide rate it dived by like a tenth. Suicide rate went down, successful suicide rate, everything dropped in terms of violent assaults, deaths, homicides. They all had
PC chat, here you go.
So I mean,
Dylan, what's up?
I am while I am saying that I don't think the manufacturers should be held accountable for down the line stuff. I wouldn't say that guns are necessarily a net benefit for America.
Well,
So I'm gonna go. I want to go to FML, right? Then Lady, then backwards man.
Okay.
And as soon as he unmutes himself, as soon as we can hear him, I'm sure he's going to yell at me for something I said that's wrong. FML is
all
actually.
of your arguments have been wrong, Prime. Come on.
Can you hear me now?
There we go. FML, go ahead,
Thank you.
please.
No, I'm not going to
Thank-
yell at you, Prime. Not at all, man. Hey, no, about manufacturers being held responsible. Look, there's a kind of bedrock principle in the United States where when manufacturers produce a legal product, they're not held responsible for any subsequent criminal misuse of that product. In fact, we have a law on this, protection of lawful commerce in Arms Act, that's specifically related to firearms, right? It's the same reason that we don't sue Budweiser or Ford for criminal drunk driving, right? So if a distributor is having a problem, right, I'm not sure why we're assuming that the manufacturer has a role in that or ought to be on the hook for knowing that the distributor distributor is having a problem or is violating the law, when it's federal investigators. We have a whole federal agency that's designed to detect, right, or to investigate when distributors are having the problem. So we're testing weapons, whether it's participating in the Real Solutions campaign, whether it's the Fix NICS initiative. There's a variety of different ways that manufacturers are working actively to prevent illegal possession of weapons in the United States. They produce a legal product. They're not responsible for the subsequent criminal misuse of that legal product.
So, okay, FML. Yes, we have specific protections for gun manufacturers. I'm saying we should get rid of those things. I'm saying that we absolutely should be able to. So it doesn't. So the laws now, as it stand now, don't concern me. I'm trying to draw a better future, right? And in this future, so maybe it'll help clear things up, right? So in this future, we would have systems in place to detect where guns are coming from, right? Where they're flowing from. As Kobe illustrated previously, there's a number of ways that they get into improper hands, right? To be used for crime. But one of them is the retail space. According to the Brady campaign, was it 5%? Sorry, 90% of illegal guns, of crime guns, they have a definition for crime guns, come from 5% of gun dealers. So 90% come from 5% of gun dealers. So most gun dealers are following the law, right? But there's clearly an influx, right? So there's clearly bad actors in these spaces. And all I'm asking the manufacturers to do is to not sell to them. Not sell to them. So in the world that I would like, right, is that once we detect them, and we can detect where these guns are coming from, that we would notify a manufacturer, hey, this is where these guns are being used. Maybe you should stop selling to them, right? Just like we would start with the distributor, because maybe the distributor doesn't know. It's a possibility. Maybe they literally have no idea, okay, right? They want to find someone or put someone in jail if they actually have no idea, want to work with them first. But if they continue to be a problem, as was the case with that Chicago distributor that I was talking about, then sue them, and I would throw those assholes in jail, right? Because I think they're fucking criminals. So then up the chain, right? You've told the manufacturer, you've informed the manufacturer, this distributor, the guns that you're sending there are ending up on streets and used in illegal acts, right? If they do not respond, then yes, they should be open to a suit or maybe even criminal prosecution. That's the word I'm talking about. That's currently not what we have, obviously.
Weren't you dealing with it at the
Okay,
source?
all right. So if someone can sell,
Hold on. I want FML to be able to respond, then we're going to move on.
Yeah, sure, Prime. I don't think anybody would disagree that once the federal government notifies a manufacturer that a distributor in particular is violating the law, that distributor probably has already had its license revoked by the federal government to sell firearms. And if the manufacturer continues to then sell to that distributor, well, I'm sure we probably already have a federal law that puts them on the hook, right? For
That's what I'm
continuing
trying
to
to
sell
do.
to unlicensed. Right. So I'm already sure that probably exists, right? But that isn't a logical hook, right, to a more general approach to holding manufacturers of firearms legally responsible for the misuse or illegal use of their products.
So
I mean, you're talking
I want
about
to
a
be
very narrow.
I want to be very
space.
clear as to what I'm saying, right? It's not that okay. Okay, so Eucharist over here, clearly, right, criminally insane. Put a gun in his hands, don't know what he's going to do with it, right? I guess I haven't been clear, but that the victims of that crime can then immediately go and sue, right? Because Eucharist, as an individual, has done that. I'm saying that if there's a clear chain of a clear pattern of abuse, that's when this happens. Like I don't think it would make sense for every individual crime, right? For every victim to be able to take a lawsuit. Like that's just I don't even know how that would work, right? That just doesn't.
Crime.
So like I'm looking for patterns. That's why I drew the comparison to the pill mills. Does that make more sense to you then, FML? FML? Did you hear me?
In a very, very narrow sense of behavior that we can all concede is probably already illegal. And if it's not, it ought to be. I don't see any disagreement to be had here, right? I mean, what we're really talking about is more of a generalized liability to the manufacturers for the behavior of distributors or the behavior of customers who possess their products, right? It's the Sandy Hook case, right? Where the parents of the Sandy Hook victims are trying to sue Bushmaster or Remington, their parent company, for that mass shooting, right? And so, Prime, you have a point in a very, very narrow space. A distributor who is determined by federal investigators to have behaved illegally and has their license revoked. Of course, manufacturers who try to sell to that distributor ought to be held responsible or legally liable for violating federal law. And that's pretty simple.
So I think what's being missed between what you're saying, because I agree with 100% of what you said, and what Prime's saying is, like, without that federal license being revoked, he's saying like a distributor who legally is still supposed to be legally able to buy guns should have, like, the manufacturer shouldn't have a right to sell to them. And to me, that doesn't make sense. I feel like you fixed the legal channel. Like, if their license should be revoked or at least suspended pending investigation if we feel like this is a problem. But as long as they're legally able to buy guns, I feel like that the manufacturer should be legally able to sell to them. I feel like we should hold the government accountable, not the manufacturer in that regard.
Let's go to Lady, then backwards man, then Fonz, and Eucharist, who hasn't. I know he wants to say something. He just cannot raise his fucking hands. And Lynn Leader.
Okay, so the selling of guns, the selling of any product, I guess, kind of doesn't have like a net zero game. So sure, you could say that they didn't intend for anything to happen, but somebody's going to have to pay for funerals. Somebody's going to have to pay for a lot of different things. And in many cases, the state's going to step in and pay for certain things. I mean, if we're saying that the state's underfunded to catch these criminals in the first place so that people aren't harmed, why would they be funded enough to do proper investigations on the channels where they're getting all these different guns, all these different products? Like, I think that if there is risk in selling a product to the American public, that the company should have a financial stake in it, and they can quantify the risk of what's going to happen to everyone they're exposing to their product. And then they have some part in taking ownership. So it's not just us after everything's already fallen apart, like, let's figure it out with the state, which is already having trouble figuring out a lot of stuff.
Okay. Let's go to backwards mom.
Okay. I agree a lot with what Lady by Name was saying. As someone who is a victim of being robbed at gunpoint, I would like to live in a world where if I was killed in that moment, then my family could sue the manufacturer for my death as a result of their weapon being what killed me. So, I was literally held up at gunpoint. So,
why not sue the people who made having a gun in your city legal, or have the people who, made manufacturing guns legal?
Because those people are dead, or skeletons in the ground.
I'm pretty sure
Okay, so you just want to
you're just gonna lose.
Sue the corporation. All right, fine. I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Okay. So like I said, I would like to live in a world where if one of their weapons killed me, then my family would be able to sue them. And I think that's how it should be.
No, that's dumb though, man. Like I could sharpen a stick and kill you with that. Are you gonna fucking? Are you gonna sue trees?
Yeah, but here's the thing: like, you as a criminal may get away, but there's gonna be obvious evidence.
You can sue trees. Yeah, cool.
Do me a favor and shut the fuck up for a second.
Only 2 J's in my name.
Either way, point is that the criminal may get away, but the evidence of the weapon that was used is going to be like right there.
Yeah, it's the tree sap. That I made.
So even though
sue the trees, let's go.
So you may not be able to catch the criminal, you could at least sue the company.
Ban the trees.
That's just financial opportunism. That's it. That's all that is. At least let's acknowledge it. Let's at least own that.
The trees can't kill anyone. So that's a fucking stupid argument.
But they
right
are
there.
the weapons.
Well, guns don't kill people. Trees do.
No,
guns sharpen them and stab people with them.
No, guns do kill people, motherfuckers.
Okay. All right. Well, let's. Oh man. Oh, this is going off the rails.
Man.
Eucharist.
I go by.
Respond, and then leader FML, I think.
Okay, I have like 3 points. I'll try to make them fast.
You might would think differently if you had a gun in your fucking face, by the way.
I thought that Lady's point about the class action lawsuit thing was really interesting, and I think it gets to the heart of a disagreement that we might be having, or maybe a misunderstanding. I don't know what we're going to call it. But I think we need to distinguish between the idea that harm could be caused by a particular thing, like a gun or like child Tylenol or something like that, and the kind of harm that can lead to lawsuits like class action lawsuits. Because you go into like a Target and there's a board as soon as you walk in with things posted on it that's talking about a bunch of recalls.
A big relation between
so the companies that actually recall their products and make a good faith effort to inform consumers that they're dangerous, reimburse them even, blah blah blah. Those companies are not subject to class action lawsuits because they've taken the necessary steps to rectify possible harms. So what happens with like child Tylenol is that they find through a legal proceeding that they knew or should have known that this product was going to have XYZ harms, and they failed to properly inform consumers, and they failed to rectify it, and so they become liable. And so maybe, I think this is my point in chat all along, maybe we could come to the conclusion that there's something that gun manufacturers are doing that's negligent, or maybe a particular distributor. Maybe we could find, if we carry out a lawsuit against them, that they are doing something negligent. But like we already have a legal process for that. So as FML said, right, the problem is here that we're dealing in a space where a legal gun is being legally sold by a manufacturer to someone who the federal government told that manufacturer they could sell to. They have a federal firearms license, being sued or is under investigation for violating the law and potentially going to lose their FFL. Maybe there is a way that the government notifies these manufacturers not to sell these people, and if they don't have an FFL anymore, then they can't. They just don't. And so like he said, yeah, they can be absolutely be punished for that. I wanted to respond to Kobe about the comparison to the big tobacco stuff. So something that came up in the litigation of the big tobacco settlement is like and this, you can find this this on the
This dude's right.
Wikipedia, but
I
it's in a
need to
lot of
get me
other
a
articles too.
bookshelf.
The boiled down statement
To
was
look
like,
smart.
you cause the health crisis, you get to pay for it. Okay, that makes sense. It's intuitive to a lot of us, Lady and other people. This makes sense to us. Like, you are harming people, you should pay for that harm. I think the problem is that the tobacco crisis is on a scale that absolutely dwarfs anything else that we're talking about. Still today, after all of our reforms, right, hundreds, so I'm just looking at the most recent CDC fast facts, more than 480,000 deaths per year in the United States. That is over 10 times the number of firearm deaths across the board. That is over 10 times more than the number of automobile-related deaths across the board. It's nearly
it's
10
almost
times
the
number
half
of
as much as
poisoning
COVID.
deaths.
Wow.
So,
and it might be
no, that's just in the United States. So anyway, so I'm saying that what we're dealing with issues that are dwarfed in scale compared to the big ones that we like to talk about. So if we want to, I think it would be fair to say that if we really, really want to say a gun manufacturer can be sued every time one of their guns is used to unlawfully kill someone, however you figure that out, if the gun isn't dumped, I don't know, then we're opening the door for, suing Ford Motor Company when their car is used in a negligent homicide, right? How do you distinguish those things? Maybe you distinguish it by, as some people have said, well, the gun is designed to kill people, the car isn't. I just don't know if that's fair, because as people have said, we're talking about the difference between legitimate uses of a gun and illegitimate uses of a gun. Most people who own guns don't use them to hurt people. Now, over two-thirds of gun-related deaths are suicide, so it's people hurting themselves and not other people. And so we can talk about laws that help
really
prevent
sucks, Dan.
those. Things like
I'm sorry to hear
waiting
that.
periods seem to help those.
And I
So
feel like a
as
lot of these
I always
issues,
do when this conversation comes up
come
on
up
Prime's
because
panels,
people
I'm going to
don't,
link a study
understand.
by the Rand Corporation, The Science of Gun Policy. They recently came out with a second edition, I think it was in 2020, that basically looks at every gun policy that we have in the United States, in cities, in states, federally, and just tries to figure out if the research that we have can support the idea that any of these have any positive effects or negative effects in social science, rather, on rates of suicide, rates of homicide, things like that. It's a really comprehensive study. If you want to know the best research we have on what policies actually work for the things that we care about, you should read it.
So you're shilling for the Rand Institute, apparently, but like
I'm saying read the fucking research.
If they give you that actual analysis, then yeah, cool. And Ayn Rand based, I guess.
No,
but, like,
that's not the Rand. No,
okay, no, I know. That was memeing. I'm sorry.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
okay,
Ayn Rand.
okay.
Ayn Rand
Okay,
sucks.
I'm just making sure.
Yeah. But it's amazing that that you need so much research, whereas like every other developed country in the world doesn't have as many guns, and therefore. They analyze
this.
Doesn't have as many gun murders or suicides.
So Leader brought up
how are you so
Australia
dense,
case.
America?
So Leader brought up the Australia case, and this is something that they bring up in the Science of Gun Policy thing. They look at some outside of the U.S. examples, and something that's really interesting is that about the same time that Australia goes through its big period of gun reform, New Zealand doesn't really do much of that, but their murder rates, their suicide rates, and their mass shooting rates kind of track with each other. So it suggests that there might be something external, not just the Australia policies, that are driving changes in murder, suicide, and mass shooting.
Are you inferring that New Zealand has a lot of guns?
Rubber ducks are designed.
Their cops don't even have guns.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find the particular part of it, or maybe it might be a different step. But yeah, message me. I'll send it to you.
I have a question.
Hold on. I
don't even know if you can hear me.
I just want, because I know. Hold on one second. Kobe, I know you wanted to deal with you, Chris, real quick, because I know you got to go. So go ahead.
Let me deal with them. No, I think it's legitimate, right? I do think it's legitimate. Like trying to distinguish between like the legitimate use of something and then like how much is too much. I think that, for example, I think you can make the same kind of argument. Like the legitimate use of a cigarette is to have one a year, and you never have that, or something like this, right? Or like you only inhale it, or whatever, right? But I don't think that that's I do think that I can't craft it right now, but I do think that there is a point where you produce a product that you intend it to be used in X way, but it is so incredibly likely that it is going to be used in a nefarious way that there's some level of culpability. I do think I correct. I don't know if I can formulate it right now, but I do think it was a good response, or very well articulated response, Chris.
I mean, so like with the thing that FML said about the shootings, maybe what he said is right. I'll need to see the stats on that about like the Australian versus like.
Yeah, I'll try to find the particular section that I'm talking about.
But what I will say is that, you know, in terms of like mass shootings, mass killings, Australia hasn't had like a deadly sort of like killing like that in almost since like the gun laws were enacted. There is very little like gun violence in Australia, and it may also be the case that New Zealand like doesn't have like, it could be because of the prevalence of like weapons like in America that these sort of things do happen, degree that they do happen. Maybe that's sort of like the maybe that's sort of more the issue. I'd sort of like, that could be it. But
I'm sure it
I would
does,
say,
Bob.
you know, in response to that, at least that, you know, we're like, there is no threats to our, there's no like mass threats to our schools, no mass threats, you know. I'd say like, you know, the gun violence that's like dominates America doesn't dominate Australia. And I think that is like a really good reason for gun reform. Just saying.
Can I ask one quick question? I'm sorry,
He's saying what I'm saying. I'm saying like we also don't have guns all over the place. All right,
I
like
gun
only
reform.
people who like hunt have guns. All right, no
Well,
one's
over
doing
here,
it for
yeah, lots of
self-defense.
guns.
Come on, stop doing it.
Just very briefly, JJ, earlier you were seemingly, and I mean, anybody else wants to answer this. People who seemingly don't think the idea like, oh well, if you should, you know, if I could hypothetically sue someone for creating a gun, can I sue a tree for somebody making a sharp stick? Do you think that it's like wrong to sue like cigarette manufacturers because people like smoked them and got cancer?
The gun and cigarette were made to do the things they were made to do. The tree was just an innocent tree, and you made it into a weapon.
So like basically the negligence point, right?
Yeah.
People produce cigarettes not necessarily to go out killing a bunch of people, but somebody has to take the mass effect, the financial burden of the people who die, all the stuff that happens to them. And I feel like also you encouraging, well, I don't know if that works for the cigarette company, but I feel like for gun companies, if you allow them to take on some of the risks, that is a stick that will encourage them to actually try to mitigate the risks. You know what I mean? Like there shouldn't be a game where they could just throw it out. Let's just see what happens. Maybe there's an investigation. I think it should be more like, I am a company who decided to sell guns, and I have taken on the responsibility to, as much as I can, be the most responsible gun seller, more responsible than the average gun seller, so that you know, hopefully my guns don't get into the wrong hands. Hopefully people won't commit suicide with them. Hopefully people won't do that. Right now we're relying on
What is the incentive to do that though? Like, what is the incentive?
Well,
if you sell to criminals in cash, you get more money. You know.
Well,
you gotta
the idea
really
is
regulate that shit, and the more regulation in guns, like the more chance of a fucking civil war you guys have, because your conservatives are so weird.
I don't even know. Well, I'm just saying that if you give them, like, if they have to accept the risk, then they will try to mitigate the risk because it will help them out with financial gain. You know what I mean?
Yep, I agree with that for sure.
Okay. FML, and then I know Bam wanted to say something, but yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Prime. So to Kobe's point about guns being primarily used, I think he was sort of suggesting that firearms were primarily being used for crime or in the commission of crime. That seemed to be the generalization he was going for. Yet we have hundreds of millions of firearms in the United States. What that necessarily means is that a vanishingly small number of guns are actually used in the commission of a crime. I mean, we're talking a tiny, tiny number, right? So I don't see how Kobe moves from that guns can be used in the commission of a crime to suggesting that that crime itself is either dominated by the use of firearms or that firearms exist only for the commission of crime. I just don't see that logic bridge that he's trying to make.
Can I help you with that?
Please do.
Okay, so the only reason that like a gun would be in any sort of record would be if you're either shooting to try to get like a bullseye, like you're doing like a sharpshooter thing, and then you maybe write down like how many times you shot, or if a crime is being done. So of course, every time there's a gun at a crime, it's being monitored, it's being written down.
Okay,
so yeah, every time there is a gun crime, there's a gun present. Was that your point?
No, not at all. The point
Okay.
being is that there are hundreds of millions of guns in the United States, and it's a vanishingly small number of crimes that are committed with guns, meaning that the number of guns actually used in a crime is about that infinitesimally small, right? So guns are used for far more activities than just killing people or trying to victimize people, right?
I mean, I think you've kind of got that backwards there. I'd say you said
Does
like
Prime have his
you said
hand
like
up?
a small
Prime, dude, just cut this guy out.
You said like you've got like a small amount of like guns per guns per like weapons killed, and it really sort of like that's not the statistic that like matters at all. It's the violence with guns that matters. Just because like you've got like, oh, we've got so many weapons, we've got thousands of weapons. Look at all the weapons we have.
I mean, the guns don't kill people. People kill people. Argument is
Yeah,
like,
I've got 10
I mean,
guns, but I've only murdered someone.
I just
The point
think
that I was
gun
addressing
violence in
was
general
Kobe's,
isn't
right?
something
And
to like really talk
furthermore,
about
that
in America.
everything
I mean,
that
not that
folks
it's not a
want
problem,
to
but it's
suggest
just
in
not the
terms
level
of
of
gun
problem
control
that we like.
is always affecting the law-abiding citizen or the
There's probably
law-abiding
there's probably like 20
manufacturer,
other
right?
more important things.
So you want to take
fix
those guns
America
away.
before we
You
get
want
to
to
guns.
inhibit the use of those legal products.
Okay,
those
how
legal firearms.
What's legal that is hurting the customer and not the seller?
I don't understand the formulation here.
Okay, so like,
Right.
why is the new hard law against guns affecting you, the buyer, and not the seller?
Well, what new hard law are we talking about?
Whatever one you're talking about that was taking away your so-called rights.
They make them
No,
accept
so
all-
for example, removing a class of firearms, right, from being legally sold in the U.S., that doesn't affect criminals. That affects consumers, right, who by and large do not use their firearms in the commission of crime. Law-abiding citizens now being prohibited from buying a class of firearms, right? Whether that's a rifle or a handgun or otherwise. That's an imposition on legal law-abiding gun owners.
Well, no, I mean less guns being in circulation does lower, like it does impact, it does affect criminals. And like I said, I'm pro
Lee,
guns.
to your
but
point,
if you accept that that more guns in the community equals like that essentially more guns you have, the more sort of available they are for criminals to use, then yeah, sort of like it does affect like criminals in the crime rate.
So Lee, two things here. So we saw in 2020 a record increase, 8 million firearms sold to new firearm purchasers, right? What did we see with violent crime committed with a firearm? Going down, as it has been for decades in the United States, despite the huge expansion in number of firearms being bought and possessed in the United States.
All right,
hold on.
Listen to this. Yo, dude. Okay, talking about Chicago, right?
Chat, I dropped a couple of links for you, Lead, about whether or not Australia's buyback
Fluctuating
program
so hard. What the hell?
actually
I'm not sure
resulted in
something's up with
reducing
you.
the number of homicides or suicides.
I would like to talk about the Chicago gun crime just for a
It
second.
didn't reduce the amount. It reduced like the lethality of home invasions. It reduced like the lethality of suicide.
Oh, because I heard you say it reduced the number of homicides and reduced the number of suicides. So I dropped a couple of links addressing that directly.
Wants to get in a second
Sure.
too.
Maybe I was a little bit sort of gung ho.
Fair enough. No, that's fair enough.
Hey, I have a question about the evidence, deadass. So on the Rand report that you linked, I wasn't really finding much about manufacturers. Is there a specific part of the report you'd like to look at for the manufacturers?
No, I just always link this when we're having gun conversations because there's a lot of assumptions that get kicked around about what gun policies work, which ones don't, and so it's just the most comprehensive survey of state. The reason why there's not much on manufacturers is manufacturing guns is just legal within federal parameters.
There's a lot on a lot of
level.
other things that we could talk about pretty easily. But if we want to keep on the manufacturing,
yeah. So no, I don't need to go down the other rabbit holes for sure. Yeah.
Okay, let's go to Bam and then backwards.
Oh, yeah, I was. Crap! I almost forgot the original point I wanted to make. I was about to say, but generally speaking, there is some truth to there is a level of healthy gun control that could be had in this country. I don't think maybe there are some people in the panel that disagree to that, but I think that's simple. But as far as dealing solving the problem from the manufacturing side of things. It just seems counterproductive, and it seems way more difficult to like prove, like, or way more difficult to way more difficult to do. But like the simple solution is, like I said, just hold the federal government responsible for doing this level of research. And if they are finding people who are like being irresponsible, like with their distributors being irresponsible, then suspend them, like, and suspend their license and pin an investigation, or literally just remove their license. That seems like attacking the issue at the source. Now, from the manufacturing perspective, like, I think it would be like a good thing to have like a premium for high risk distributors, like distributors who are like operating legally, but like they're in an area that has like a high crime rate related to them, like not necessarily attached directly to them, but they're operating in a city that has like a high rate of like gun violence. It would make sense if they wanted to do like a high risk premium to these companies to potentially like decrease the level of guns that like specific company is getting. But anything more than that, just like I said, I don't think placing the culpability on the responsibility on the manufacturer like does what we want it to do.
Okay, Backersman and fines.
Yeah, this is the thing that I don't understand about people who say that guns don't kill people, people kill people, but yet they'll argue, the person taking the medicine killed themselves, or the doctor prescribed the medicine. It wasn't the medicine that killed them. But clearly they'll argue and say like, well, the gun wasn't the one that killed them, but the medicine was. So couldn't the same argument be made? It's like, well, it's not the medicine that killed them. It's the person taking the medicine, or the doctor prescribing it. But yet we clearly don't do the law that way.
We do hold doctors accountable, exactly like that. Like if doctors prescribing,
so why can't the same be done with guns?
Well, it is done with guns. There's a lot of regulations about like when a person who has a federal firearms license sells a gun, what they have to do and who they can sell it to. So we do that. I mean, we could have arguments about like private deals and all these other things, but we have a ton of regulations in place already about who can sell guns to whom and when and why. Like,
no. What was said to me was that if I was killed with a gun, that it wasn't the gun, it was the person. If someone dies by medicine, it's not the medicine. It's the doctor.
The situation in that case is the doctor prescribing you a drug that you are intended to take, and if they're over prescribing in a way that we can prove is negligent, they can be punished. Like they can be brought up before medical ethics boards. There's all sorts of things that can happen.
It's like if you're doing autoerotic asphyxiation, and someone was like, if you like choke yourself a little bit while you jerk off, it's really good. And then you like die doing that, like so many people did.
So
maybe then that would be both their problem and your problem.
Like it still completely ignores the fact that it wasn't the person that killed me just by themselves. It was the gun. Just like
So they went and got a gun. Maybe they got it illegally. Maybe they got it legally. If they got it illegally, we could have some policy discussions about how to deal with that. If they got it legally, they went and got a gun. They, according to our current system, our current constitution, our current laws, had a right to obtain, and then they did a horrible, awful fucking thing with it. Yeah, for sure. And they should be punished for that, and it shouldn't have happened. And we can talk about what the aftermath should be like and all of that, but I just don't know where in that. Just like if that person bought a car and intended to run you over with it. What, like, is it the car manufacturer's fault now? I just don't know where we're drawing that conclusion.
So why is it the why is it the manufacturer of the medicine's problem and not the manufacturer of the gun?
Well, in the case of this, there's a lot of reasons, because they were giving doctors kickbacks for overprescribing it, because they knew it was more dangerous than they were actually saying, because they weren't open about the risks to consumers. Right? There's lots of reasons. Yeah. So we can.
But both are causing deaths. So
Right, but it's not as if, as Prime said earlier, it's not as if the drug company is being held individually responsible for each person who died of a drug overdose or got addicted or ended up in the hospital. That's not what's happening. We're trying to find some way, which is really difficult and really frustrating and really awful through a legal process, but to quantify the harm that was directly caused by their actual negligence. So if you can come up with a way to prove that gun manufacturers are negligent, like as FML brought up, right? There are active lawsuits against gun manufacturers alleging things like their advertisements are negligent. They encourage a certain view of this firearm that's going to encourage the wrong sort of person to buy it and use it for bad. Like, you can make those legal arguments in court. We have ways of dealing with those.
Okay, so I'll say the way
we got a few people. So we got Fines, and then we'll go Lady. Before that, I just want to ask. Fuck, what was that question? To FML. You were talking about an imposition on individuals, right? On legal
law-abiding gun owners,
right? Law-abiding gun owners. Thank you for that. Yeah, law-abiding gun owners. But isn't that the case for literally anything else, right? Any regulation puts an imposition on people who have legally obtained something, right?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we often hear that same comparable point made about voting, particularly with felons, right? Felons ought to be able to vote even while incarcerated, because this is a constitutional right to participate in this democracy. Our right to bear arms is also a constitutional right, so we ought to weigh more carefully, right, the infringement upon our right to possess firearms, okay? And so we have, and because someone's been hearkening kind of to a gun control angle here that hasn't been, a rabbit hole that hasn't been dug yet, but if we're going to go further with gun control, then we ought to be really, really specific about what we mean by that, because as we know, for the last 25 years, every single mass shooting in the United States involved a violation of federal and or state laws. And yet we still hear the gun control lobby and activists promoting or advocating imposing this federal law across all the states, or this state law across the federal government, or across all of the states. And yet we see consistently that those gun laws are already violated on a consistent basis, and just expanding their enforcement across the entire United States isn't going to help that anyway.
I'll deal with you later, but thank you for that FML. No, I'm sorry. I'll we'll fight later.
I got away from your question.
No, it's fine. But okay, let's go to
like Batman.
Was it Fines? Then Lady. Then Nathan, I'm sure, wants to jump in. All right.
I think what I'm noticing is that we really don't have the evidence yet. I think that if we find some more evidence that distributors are being influenced in some way by manufacturers to distribute illegally we're talking illegally.
What time is it where y'all
because the initial article that Prime brought up at the very beginning was talking about an illegal distribution of guns by a distributor. Okay, they were breaking the law, they were breaking federal law in dealing with guns, and at the end of the day, the whole conversation about legal gun owners isn't really applicable here. I don't even know how that is even a conversation, because we're dealing with illegal distribution of guns. And so when we're talking about illegality, right, not only are we talking about distributors being illegal, but we're talking about criminal organizations being illegal. Now we have to start following the money back to the manufacturer. So if we don't have the evidence to substantiate that, or if we do have the evidence to substantiate that, then I feel like that's the crux of this argument, because we aren't able to even make that link to begin with.
It's 1:30 here.
And I want to make the link because it makes sense to me. Intuitively, it makes sense that there is a link between the manufacturer and the distributor. But I think maybe in this actual case, we should be looking for the evidence that gets us there, because we got the evidence, and that'll come in time through the lawsuit. That'll come in time through lawsuits. That'll come in time the way it was with the pills pill farms. So it's kind of just a waiting game because I haven't seen the evidence, but I am gonna like maybe do a little research and maybe put some stuff in the VC chat and see if we can find stuff.
Thank you so much, lady. And then blanking. Fuck. Nathan, sorry, you moved on my screen.
So I was gonna say that I think the way that we like try to deal with the issue of the misuse of guns, which is an issue that we should study and deal with, is research and development. Right now, the government at large spends like I think 4.6% of the budget on research and development, and there's a lot of stuff for them to be researching and developing. And I think that if there's a market that is making money off of guns, then maybe some of the risk should be given to them so that they would be encouraged to pay for some of the research and development. Right now, we're always dissatisfied with the amount of research and development the government is doing. So if we have a private issue, which it is like the issue of the gun companies in a way, there's an issue with the business where they want to sell guns, then maybe we should have a private solution. Like they should do more research and development on who's killing people or themselves with their guns.
Nathan?
Yeah, I just wanted to address some of the points I heard about gun control. Gun control isn't just about dealing with mass shooters. Gun control is also, in general, trying to lower the presence of guns in society. Not make it illegal, but just lowering the presence, because that will have positive effects in the long term. Gun presence alone, there's been a lot of research done on this, is a major factor in increasing homicides and suicides. So if there's specific policies we can do to make it a little more tough to own a gun, but still it's legal, then I think we should absolutely do it. There's a lot of very popular policies. For example, a Fox News poll showed that 90% of respondents wanted universal background checks. 81% supported taking guns away from at-risk individuals, and 67% supported banning assault weapons. Now, you don't have to agree with all those policies. Personally, I'm agnostic on the assault weapons ban. But if any of these policies can lower the presence of guns, you would then see a lowering of homicides and suicides, which I think is beneficial. As for dealing with, like the liability of certain gun manufacturers with murder, I think we have to look case by case, because if someone goes through the process completely legally, and they seem stable and all that stuff, and suddenly a heated moment happens and they kill somebody, I don't think that the manufacturer is liable, right? But if you can find some sort of link of responsibility, let's just say, I don't know, a gun manufacturer. So let's say there's an area with a lot of violence and a gun manufacturer builds a lot and tries to sell a lot in a certain area, then yeah, maybe you can say that there's some liability, maybe. But I think in most cases, it's going to be hard to find that liability. So my priority when it comes to guns would just be lowering its presence with gun control.
What you just said was I think you like would range more true with distributors than like manufacturers. Again, like
yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah, because you're talking about like manufacturers don't necessarily pick the locations where they sell. They sell where the people buy, like where the distributors buy.
Yep, that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
You, Chris, you go, and then I want to try to interact with FML again. Try it again to where I was going.
Sure. So I mean, we could have a more general gun control conversation. I will say, like, one thing that if you do like read the RAND stuff and all the other research we have on gun control right now, it's not entirely clear that there is a linear relationship between the presence of guns and gun violence. That's not what the research bears out. So the number of guns in a given area, no, it's not. It's just
it is. Come on, every other country that doesn't have guns. Come on, dude.
Wait.
Hang on.
I don't want to interrupt, but like,
I don't know, guys. I don't credential pull. I don't credential pull. I literally teach this in college. Like the research is not clear that the number of guns in a given area has a direct correlation to the amount of gun violence. It's just not true. You can have places that have far more guns than another area and lower rates of gun violence. Okay, that is just true. It's not like there needs to be more research on this, but you can just read all of the good research we have on this, and it's just not clear that lowering the number of guns necessarily lowers the number of gun
How big
violence.
of an area are we talking about?
I will
How big
gladly
of an area
reference
are we
what
talking about?
State. It's on the state level in the United States. I'll be specific. On the state
I
level,
will gladly reference what I was saying earlier after you're done.
doesn't seem to correlate. There are places in the U.S. that have more guns than Chicago. Okay, like
Yeah,
that have
okay,
lower
but
rates
the
of gun
thing about
violence. Okay.
Chicago,
Let's-
Chicago is it's 30 minutes away from fucking Gary, Indiana.
Yeah, so this is actually what I want to talk about. That's what. Okay, so we can have a more general gun conversation or gun control conversation. But the article that Prime linked dealing with this one gun store that in Gary, Indiana, I think is really interesting and a really interesting case for what we're actually talking about and what our intuitions are on who should be held responsible in this case. In this article, right, this one dude bought 90 guns from the same store in Gary, Indiana in a very small time window. And I'm sorry, man, if you're selling guns in Gary, Indiana, you know that the people who are buying them are from Chicago, okay? Or are selling them to people from Chicago. So if some one dude is buying 90 guns, you know that, like, even if you don't know, you know that that person is engaging in illegal activity. You are legally, federally not allowed to buy a gun with the intention to sell it to someone over state lines. You can't do that. It's illegal.
All right,
So
but
that store
hey,
knew.
what if,
Okay.
What if
So,
he?
but-
What if,
wait,
what if
Hold on.
Let you finish.
One more small thing. So tying that into the broader conversation and the gun control conversation, universal background checks wouldn't stop that because that person is selling out of his trunk to somebody from Chicago after he buys it from the store that did a background check and cleared him. He could legally buy that gun, and then he is illegally selling it to someone over state lines. So universal background checks won't stop that. He still knows that he's selling it to a criminal who couldn't buy it anyways because he wouldn't be doing it otherwise. So that's, I mean, it's not an argument against universal background checks. It's just saying in the cases that we're talking about, universal background checks wouldn't necessarily stop that. And then in this case, who is responsible? Well, if the manufacturer knows that this one place is doing that, if they know that for a fact, yes, I agree morally and possibly legally. They should stop selling to them. And if they keep selling to them, they could be held liable for that. What is the mechanism by which they would know that that is happening? It would be through that place's FFL getting revoked. I don't know how else they would know. How else do you think they would know to the extent that they would need to know for a negligence lawsuit?
They should be knowing.
People like there's no reason for a gun store to not sell as many guns as they want according to your laws. But like if another person gets all their guns stolen or they don't have their guns like 3 months after they bought them. When the government came to check they had the guns that they said they had, then yeah, that's a crime. Like, why don't you just do that? Be like, if you buy a gun, we should be able to come to your house and be like, hey, show me the guns. Okay, cool.
It feels really weird.
Yeah, well,
This is just
broader conversation.
This is just wonderful that that gentleman right there brought up the fact that said an area such as states, but like people can just transport them across state lines. And like apparently he wants to say that
the Gary, Indiana, Chicago thing is all about state rights.
But like it's all it's all about like this when it's like the wider context is in the United States that there is a large gun. Then I'd say almost any other Western country, you guys probably have more guns there than anywhere else, and a higher percentage of like gun violence. And you want to say, yeah, it's not really an issue.
Well, that's not true. Higher than most developed
reason of
countries.
violence.
We're
The reason of violence
nowhere
is CRT.
close to
Okay.
Western, didn't I?
If I may, there was a point you made that like the presence of guns does not necessarily increase things like murders or suicides or anything like that. That's not necessarily true. The reason I make this claim is because we can see in Iowa, and according to an AP article, gun deaths were rising in 2021 as a new law removes handgun permits. We can see in 2020, broadly speaking, the gun violence did not stop, even if there was less mass shootings, and there was also a significant boost in just gun presence in general in the United States. We can see that handgun ownership is a major risk for suicide, according to a large-scale research that looked at 20 million people over a 12-year period that showed that handgun ownership alone does increase the chances of suicide. We can also see other laws or other research that's been done where it shows the impact of gun violence restraining orders laws in the United States and firearm suicide among older adults, which are a susceptible group to that. unfortunately. And the research shows that the hypothesis was supported, but that stricter versions of gun violence order would lower suicide rates among older people. Strict firearm legislation in general would decrease gun-related suicides. So, I mean, I've looked at a lot of research on this, and some of the research is very extensive. 12-year period research, pretty good stuff. Yeah, and also it's not just universal background checks that would be part of potential gun control laws that are also extremely popular. There's also just longer waiting periods, of course, universal background checks as well, other things in general. But yeah.
I want to say something. Like, this isn't even something you have to address, you Chris. Like, this is just sort of a point. Because I know when some people throw 30 points at you, you can't like address all of them. But like, I think that the thing you said about the correlation between the amount of guns and gun violence, like, I haven't seen the data, but I would assume that data has to be at best inconclusive, just because you're dealing with the issue like Gary, Indiana. Like, I assume the only way you could record that data is through like where people buy guns, like how many guns are bought in that city. Like, you can't necessarily control for what.
Right, and we don't actually have data on that. You can't. They don't report.
Yeah, you can't know. You don't know what you don't know at the end of the day, right?
Yes. So this is why I'm saying I think the claim I was pushing back against was the idea that measures that would reduce the number of guns in a given area would reduce gun violence. That is absolutely unclear given the data that we have. So the problem with the kind of studies that you're citing, especially specific cases in like one particular city, one particular area, or one particular state.
You mean 12-year research studies?
Yes. Look, hang on. Let me finish my fucking
20
point.
million people.
God damn it. Like, let me
go ahead.
Finish my fucking point. Okay. The problem is that we don't actually know how many guns there were in that particular area. And we can't do a randomized controlled trial to introduce more guns in that area and see if it increases the rate of crime. What you were talking about when you mentioned stuff about suicide. What you are talking about when you talk about things like suicide and the presence of guns in the home is different than the number of guns in a given area and general gun crime. Yes, we actually have great evidence that the presence of a gun in the home does increase the risk of gun suicide. Yes, we actually have pretty decent evidence that waiting periods on things like handguns and strict restrictions on things like handguns and handgun licensure does reduce gun suicide, because most gun suicides are done with handguns, and most So yes. But that is a different thing. So the reason it's different is because we can go into a scenario and say, did this person kill themselves? Yes or no? We can find that out. Did this person kill themselves with a gun? Yes or no? We can find that out. So we know, based on those two things, whether or not there was a gun present in this suicide. That is different than knowing how many guns are in a given area, like a county, like a state, like a country. So when we do research on the level of guns versus the level of gun violence, we end up using proxies. So this is a very common thing in social science research. We end up using proxies for the number of guns. The problem is that most of these studies don't actually use valid proxies of gun prevalence. So they're wild differences in estimation depending on who you look at. And that changes study by study. So one of the studies that I linked is a meta-analysis of 41 studies that test the hypothesis that higher gun prevalence levels cause higher crime rates. Probably some of the ones that you're citing are included in this meta-analysis. And what this researcher is challenging is that there are lots of methodological problems in those studies. One is that they don't use a validated measure of gun prevalence. One is that they don't control for more than a handful of variables. And one is that they don't use suitable causal order procedures to deal with the possibility of crime rates affecting gun rates instead of the reverse. So my point is, as Black American Maid said, it's inconclusive. It's not as clear as you're making it out to be. It's just really not. You know what the best?
Very clear.
Oh my God!
I'm not just talking about crime rates or anything like that. Wait, hold on. I'm talking about things like suicide and what the research does. Big research. 12 years, 20 million people. With gun control, my issue is not just, I don't want criminals owning guns, because, criminals will go do different things. Now, there's ways we can make it hard for them, yes. But what I'm saying is things like suicide. We can help people that are mentally ill.
Yeah.
You're
I feel like
absolutely
you already
right.
accepted
No,
the
I
suicide
know a
argument.
bunch of people, and I'm
let me-
really, really close
Yeah,
to a bunch of people
let me
who
see if I can
gotta-
explain
you
this.
gotta be able to
suicide,
finish.
but they didn't because they didn't
Euchre,
didn't have a
you-
fucking
you-
gun
you-
shoot themselves in the head.
I really want you, Chris, to be able to
Let me
finish.
see if I can distinguish between these two things for me. You are conflating gun in the home and suicide risk with the number of guns in a given area, and that's nonsense because I know people who have dozens of guns, and I know people
That's
who have
amazing.
0 guns. So the people who have
So
0
what you're
guns,
saying right now is people with zero accessibility to guns are the same likelihood as people with accessibility to guns to commit a murder with a gun.
that's not what I
Or it
said.
may.
Oh my
Well,
God.
well, then,
You're not-
then
listen,
the
Murder knife
you
are the
can-
same as
Oh my
people who have
gosh!
a
Shut up!
fucking gun.
Everyone, shut up! Everyone, shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
I
Right
have
now!
to.
Shut
I have
up!
to get off.
Hey, man.
Chris,
I'm in
finish.
physical pain. So there can be areas, like where I'm from, where there are small numbers of people who have lots and lots and lots of guns. Then there can be areas where most people have a gun. Those two places are going to be different in terms of gun suicides, gun homicides, gun crime generally. So the number of guns in those scenarios does not necessarily correlate to gun crime generally or even suicide risk. Yes, as I just said, the research is pretty clear. If you have a gun in the home, you are at higher risk of gun suicide. That makes sense. If you don't have a gun to kill yourself with, you're at much lower risk for gun suicide.
Why
Yes.
does it matter if you have one gun or 20 guns?
Shut up! Holy crap!
Why does it? I'll tell you why it matters. I will tell you why it matters because we are talking about whether or not lowering the objective number of guns in an area reduces the amount of gun violence and gun crime. So lowering the number of guns in an area doesn't necessarily mean fewer people have guns. So if all of my friends who have a dozen guns each all sell 2 guns to people in a different country, the number of guns in our area is lower, but the same number of people in my area have guns. Okay, we have to distinguish between those two things, and you have to do that if you want to do any good
obviously
research on the effect of these policies at all.
Someone
Okay.
else is-
I was gonna say,
This dude's
again,
spitting right now.
I do trust big studies, on this. But besides that, we can see that gun laws generally do lower suicide among people. Like I said, there was a study looking at older adults, but
I feel like
also
he said this,
one of the
like,
results
10
of that
times.
study found that strict firearm legislation in general decreases gun suicide. So, I mean, there's evidence showing that laws work to lower it. There's evidence showing that. Again, I know
feel
you.
like there's
I know
Nathan
you
doing-
used a lot of
He just has some like
jargon,
like gotcha
but I don't
setup.
think that invalidated any of my points. And you agreed with me that the presence of guns, handguns, will in fact lead to higher suicides.
We aren't talking about suicide though. Like it's not.
So my point being
like suicide's part
is
of the
we should do
conversation,
some of
but-
these mainstream. You said a lot, but I don't really think you disproved my point though.
So I think,
And
hold on,
I
I
would
think
like to bring up-
Chris. I think what you said specifically is that guns in the home increases chance of a suicide, but not guns in area, because guns in an area, like you don't know what whose hands those are in and what they're doing with that, right? So like if all the guns in the area happen to be in a secure gun store, right? In that particular area, there's a high amount of guns, but there could be no gun crime, right? So like the distribution of those guns matter. Chris, am I getting that correct?
Yes, the distribution matters, and the data is hard to get at all because we just don't know how many guns are in an area. So to make a sincere and heartfelt and in an area, right? Because policies impact areas, not individual people in homes. So if my city says I can't keep a gun in my home, we can measure how that affects gun violence and gun suicides in the aftermath. If my state says that, we can measure it in the aftermath, right?
Why are we focused? Okay, hold on. Go ahead.
Oh, yes. So yes, my point is distribution matters, and we don't actually know the number of guns, so we can't say that reducing the number of guns actually reduces the number because we don't know the original number of guns. There's no way to compare that across time.
I'm genuinely curious. I'm actually maybe a little confuzzled here, a little confused. So like the research that I referenced literally says that specific chances of suicide by gun, it does not increase by it increases with gun ownership. I'm talking about on the individual level, okay? I'm interested in making it slightly more difficult to own a gun, especially for those who are not in the position to, whether it be maybe they've had like severe depression and are going to harm themselves.
I never disagreed with that. I disagreed with a specific
so
claim that you
I'm
made,
really
which is
fucking
reducing the number
confused.
of guns
That's
reduces
what-
the amount of gun
that's-
violence, and we don't know
Yes.
that.
So we can see that the increase of guns in a household does increase suicide, 8 times for men, 35 times for women, according to this research. We can see in other methods gun control laws preventing things like suicide. So my argument being, if the research is showing in a variety of ways, including in Iowa, which signed a new law which increased the presence of guns, it also increased homicides and suicides in Iowa. We want to talk about broader areas, but I'm mainly focusing on the individual level. Honestly, my real question is, why should someone that's going to kill themselves own a gun, and why should someone that's going to kill somebody else own a gun? Isn't it reasonable to say that they shouldn't?
You've completely changed the point we were arguing about. I'm just going to say this and try to disambiguate it one more time. Let's say that everyone who owns a gun in my state has multiple guns. Let's say they each have 2 guns. And one of those guns that they own suddenly becomes illegal. And they give that up in a gun buyback program or whatever they do in Australia, and the government comes and seizes it. But we all still have one gun in our
I'm
homes.
not arguing for a
If
gun
we
buyback.
owed one gun, that's
Not
fuck.
about that.
I'm giving a hypothetical. Okay, so in this scenario, we've reduced the number. We've halved the number of guns. But everyone who still has a gun in their home, if it's a handgun, is still experiencing the same risk of gun suicide. So we have halved the number of guns, and we have not changed the risk of gun suicide at all. That is my point. You're changing the issue entirely because you made a hard claim that reducing the number of guns reduces
I'm
chance.
not
If you're
changing
saying-
my
if you're saying-
points at
if
all.
you're saying if what you're actually saying is we want to ultimately reduce the number of households where guns are present, that is again a different thing. It is a different thing from the number of guns in a given area.
let's just say
I don't.
that
If
we
we can't
are
distinguish between
advocating
them, I don't know what to do anymore.
Since you made a hypothetical, okay, let's just say hypothetically we reduce the presence of guns 50%. Okay, so that's down.
Households or areas.
Meaning-
You have to be specific.
Just in general in this country, guns are down 50%. Meaning less
talking
people
about-
have
are we talking
guns.
about
No,
Australia?
less people have guns. No, I'm talking about America. Let's
Doesn't
say
mean that less
guns-
people have guns. That's
doesn't
my
mean
point.
less
It
people have
doesn't
guns.
necessarily mean that less
Households
people
are
have guns.
You genuinely don't believe
No,
that
no.
any of these gun laws that
not
I've
listening to
proposed
me,
that are
is it?
popular are going to reduce the number of guns present in individual households.
No,
I
Nathan,
linked
Nathan,
the most
Nathan,
comprehensive studies I can in the VC chat.
All
I'm
right,
going to
Nathan,
bed because I'm in
This is
physical
this
pain.
is how your law should be. You should be able to have any gun you want.
Oh my
up
God!
to
Shut
a
up!
50
Yeah,
cal.
hold on, Nathan, you didn't listen to what he was
Crime,
saying,
man.
like at all, Like he made it, he made this very clear. I understood the point that he was trying to make here, right? Like he was saying that the exact FML. We can hear you. If you can mute yourself, we can hear you breathing, FML. But yeah, and I do want to don't go away because I do want to talk to you. But he was saying that the distribution matters. So, right? If you're saying that like a number of guns, right? Having a high number of guns in a household, in an area is problematic, and it raises the rates of crime, right? Or maybe suicide. He's saying that if one household has 10 guns, right? Lots of chances, right? For an accident to happen or purposeful suicide to happen. If they get rid of 9 of those guns, still the chance that that person will die of suicide is the exact same because that one gun is still there. There are less guns in that area, the area being a household, just for now, right? The area being a household, there are less guns there, but the chance of dying, because you only need one bullet to accomplish that task, right? You don't need multiple guns. You need one bullet and one gun. So that's what he was saying. So if you're saying just take 50% by half in the country, that doesn't actually address the issue that he was trying to tell you. That just like there could be half as many guns.
Sure.
And we already know that most guns are held by like a minority of individuals, right? Like the people who have guns have a lot of guns. Right? It's usually not just one gun; they have many guns. So again, reducing it by half, right? If I have 4 guns, then I still have 2 guns, and guns that can be either used for suicide or the commission of a crime or anything.
Yeah.
So
well, I would say in response to what you just said, Prime, the policies that I'm pushing that are also popular that I've mentioned wouldn't just be just simple reduction of guns, but also preventing people that are not qualified to own guns from even owning guns in the first place, which then in turn leads, in my view, to most likely less suicides, less homicides, etc., etc., etc. I'm not just trying to do like an Australian buyback or whatever. What I'm trying to say is we should prevent these people from having it in the first place. Therefore, less people will end their lives and less people will kill people. Yes.
Yes. Some of my best friends have tried to kill themselves and they failed. And they failed because they did not have a gun. And to get a gun in Canada, you need to do like a weekend course, and then you need to pay a lot of money. It's quite hard to get a fucking gun in Canada, all right? And if you fucking try to kill yourself with a gun, it's going to be the first time it's going to work.
Yeah.
Come on. How many? Just don't get a gun. Don't get a gun.
That's why men kill themselves more than women, because men do violent methods.
Yes,
like with
exactly. Don't get a fucking gun. Don't buy a gun, guys. Sell your guns. Get rid of them. You don't need them.
Well, control that
also
we
the
were talking
case-
about earlier is not like the control of like just giving the manufacturers a little bit more responsibility isn't necessarily like full on go into people's houses and take the guns. You know what I mean? Like just more responsibility. Sure, that's gonna influence the market on guns, but I mean, if that's really really hard for people to wrap their head around, who is against forcing gun companies, especially the ones that we know produce the most guns that are used in violent acts, doing research on how to keep that from happening, like forcing them to have a research and development team and, you know, spend a certain amount of funds about that every year instead of just saying, oh yeah, the state's gonna handle it, even though the state's not handling it. People out here dying.
Okay.
Oh, someone asked me a question in chat. What people
sorry,
who
no,
don't
sorry.
deserve guns?
We got other people. We'll come back to you.
I do have
Leader.
to go though, so I just kind of want to answer that one question. People who don't deserve guns, fucking define that motherfucker. Sure. So people that don't deserve guns are people like the guy that shot up
Americans?
Stoneman Douglas. The guy that shot up Stoneman Douglas was literally expelled from his school because he brought bullets to school. He was also clearly super fucking mentally ill. You can honestly just tell that by the way he speaks. Maybe that's a little mean. But besides the point. And also, people that are fucking gonna kill themselves, people that have had long-term depression or signs of harm, they shouldn't own a gun either. Some people will disagree with that. I've heard anarchists disagree with that. Sure, but I don't care. But I do have to go now.
Yes.
Good discussion, though. See you guys later.
Have a good one.
Leader. Leader finds backwards, man.
Okay.
Sorry. I guess like my main problem with the whole like the guns per area, like sort of reducing the amount of guns in like by half would actually do almost nothing to would do nothing to really solve anything, because the amount of guns that have an insane amount of guns per capita anyway. I Wikipedia this, it was up to like 120 per person. So I mean, like the statement that
No, dude, that's bullshit, dude. No, listen. If you had a fucking if someone was shooting like a gun at you,
Are you done talking? We'll let Leader finish.
The statement that there isn't enough gun, like reducing the amount of guns in an area, it seems to would it's not clear whether it would reduce whether it would reduce gun violence or gun deaths or suicides. It's a bit beside the point, because like when you talk about these sorts of things, the methods need sort of like the amount of like gun removal in like America would be a lot greater than half if you wanted to sort of like you wanted to affect anything, like if you actually wanted to make a reasonable change in like, statistics. I personally wouldn't want to live in a country where where there was constant violence. In an otherwise safe place, where like mentally ill, where criminals can easily get their hands on these things, and if the system is working properly, if the government is working as intended, then having guns in an area just to get back on point before I end this is like the overall like reducing it by half, 3/4, getting rid of leaving it with an eighth of the amount of guns that you'd have wouldn't affect like any of the topics that
It's like 120 for every 100.
Fines then backwards, man.
Yeah, it wouldn't affect what we're doing, and it sort of seems almost beside the point. But yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
I wanted to just real quick summarize like a report that I posted in chat. I have written like a lot here, but I'm just gonna give y'all the TLDR. I'm not gonna like go through all the details. So from a report that I read, it's by the Center for American Progress. It is, according to Wikipedia, public policy research and advocacy organization which presents a liberal viewpoint on economic and social issues. So there definitely could be bias. But I just want to bring up that this specific report.
Sorry, Slick, or sorry, FML. Background noise again, please. Yeah, sorry, buddy.
A lot of guns.
Okay.
No.
Oh, you're good.
I think it's like
this specific
400
report
million
points out a few really, really big problems that like have not literally even been talked about in this debate. So the first thing is that the gun industry is heavily unregulated. Okay, this is a fact. The federal agencies dealing with the issue, so we're talking about the ATF, which is the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives Agency, it's a bureau, my bad, not an agency, is underfunded. Okay, Congress makes it harder for federal agencies to actually do their job through a number of like weird little policy wonk ways in Congress. All right, we don't have to get into every detail. Another TLDR that I'd like to talk about is that the gun supply side actors have the agency in safety of firearms and are responsible for safeguards in place at the point of sale to prevent gun trafficking and theft. Okay? These are just some claims that I want to throw out there. This is what the report talks about. It goes really in detail into these things. But one part of the details that I would like to say is that it goes detailed into like the legal problems dealing with the ATF. It goes detailed into how the how like the ATF is literally supposed like okay, so I'm just going to read one more quote. The authority and obligation to enforce federal laws and regulations pertaining to the gun industry is vested in the ATF, which means ATF is literally the agency we want to look at when we're talking about like regulating the fucking gun industry. And we're talking about not even regulating it to ban guns. We're not talking about like making a policy change. We're not talking about like banning all guns, because I personally am pro-gun. But I'm talking about dealing with the laws we have now and dealing with like literally the ATF can't even enforce what they have now. So this is pretty important. Like the ATF should probably be funded more, and it should probably be more like invested in if we want an actual answer, if we're interested in an actual answer. So yeah.
I'm fine with making gun manufacturers help fund the ATF, to be honest.
Yeah, but it's also underfunded because Congress is underfunding it.
Yeah.
Well, that's an odd argument. We don't know what a sufficient level of funding would even look like, right? So we constantly are bombarded with messages that federal agencies are underfunded, but there's no objective way of knowing what a sufficient level of funding would be. It's simply more funding because
they're so underfunded they're not able to do their job. They're so underfunded that they have literal legal restrictions on their ability to actually like do oversight the way that it needs to be done. They're so underfunded. I
mean, those are highly generalized things that you're appealing to right now. I mean, what specifically are they not enforcing?
Sorry. Oh my god, your mic FML just keeps like going up and down. I don't know what that is.
Sorry, actually.
Yeah, it just like spikes all of a sudden. I don't know why.
Saying,
but okay,
I think I'm
Brian's gonna respond.
Missing.
Despite the importance of this part of its mission, ATF has struggled for decades with serious budget limitations that disproportionately affect the agency's regulatory work. In 2019, ATF devoted 77% of its $1.3 billion budget to law enforcement agencies, leaving only $299 million to support this. Is that 77% of the fucking money that's going to this fucking agency is going to law enforcement activities. Okay, we're talking like the baseline law shit. Like if a dude has a license that's bad or whatever, you know, we're talking like cops dealing with guns on the ground, which is important. I'm not denying it. But I am saying that it leaves only 299 million left to actually look at the regulatory oversight of manufacturers. So this is a deficit right here, all right? In 2019, ATF employed only 770 industry operations investigators in the field divisions to oversee more than 53,000 retail gun dealers and 13,000 licensed manufacturers that were in business that year. So we're having 700 fucking people look at 53,000 fucking dealers and 13,000 licensed manufacturers. This is clearly underfunded, okay? Clearly. Like, this isn't even close, man. Do you have any more questions about the report?
I agree with what you're saying, but I don't think that it inherently demonstrated what you were saying. Like, it probably, it probably is underfunded. But I'm saying that like, oh, this number, like they put all their money toward, they put a lot of money towards this, and a little bit of money towards that. Like, obviously, there's not enough money for the other thing. Like, technically, we don't know the exact number necessary.
I literally told you there are only seven.
The number's probably more because they're insufficient.
I'm saying like we don't know what sufficient looks like. That is true. Like what FML said is true. Like technically,
that's such a weird argument. Like how can we ever talk policy if all we're gonna say is like, oh, like we don't know what it looks like, bro?
But
give them more money first off, and get rid of the other congressional limitations.
But all you said was this number is bigger than this other number. Like you didn't make an argument. You said this number is bigger than this other number. Therefore,
I'm not making an argument. I'm presenting.
This is a smaller number. They only used the smaller number.
Okay, I wasn't making an argument in that breath, but as to the actual argument that like I've made from the beginning, it does substantiate because it isn't like we literally the federal agency meant to look at these issues, meant to find the evidence that I was talking about in my other times that I was speaking. Can't even find the evidence, man. They can't even regulate these industries. They can't even do anything necessary because they're not funded correctly. So it's like a weird.
Hey, Black America. Would you say that just like with like a base level understanding, say that this sounds concerning?
I'm saying that the information he gave doesn't demonstrate the argument he's trying to make. I agree.
It does.
But would you say that it sounds concerning?
I mean, sure. Anything sounds concerning. Here's what. Let me bring up let me give an analogy. So so you understand the point I'm making. If I said that if I owned a bakery, I don't know, and I spent 90% of my funds making cookies, and only 5% of my funds went towards making cupcakes. And someone said oh, the cupcakes are obviously underfunded when maybe only. But I'm just hold on. Let me finish the point. Like saying that only 5% of my funding went to cupcakes. Clearly, the cupcakes are underfunded. But what if it only takes 5% of my funds to make the cupcakes? That's what I'm saying. Like that. Just saying that one number is smaller than the other doesn't demonstrate that the small number means that it's underfunded.
I do have a question for Black American.
You can just call me Bam.
Oh my bad.
So
report.
We got to finish up fines, and then we have to get backwards, man. He's been waiting for a long time.
Okay, sorry about that. I'll finish up. My only question is, I'm willing to hear your arguments if you have any evidence that says that it's sufficiently funded, because the evidence I'm looking at and the evidence that I've literally posted and have read and TLDR'd is saying that it's insufficiently funded.
No, it's not. That's
so
what
if you want to present evidence that it is sufficiently funded,
I never made that argument that it was sufficiently funded. I said you never. I'm just saying you didn't demonstrate that it wasn't. I never agree. I agree with the premise. It's probably very underfunded. I'm just saying the information you gave doesn't prove any of that.
Yes, it
nothing
does.
You did demonstrate it. All you said was here's a big number. Here's a small number.
It doesn't prove it.
Are they overstaffed or understaffed though? Does that sound like a overstaffing issue?
We don't know.
It's an understaffing issue. I literally told you.
Let backwards go. My bad.
Well, to expound on Wade's point of view and Fines Live, my question would be, well, the government is responsible for the general welfare and safety of the American public, and they allow these manufacturers to sell these weapons which could be used against the general public. So therefore, should these manufacturers legally have to have a vested interest in the general safety and welfare of the American people that they're selling these weapons to?
Also, why should 56% of us who do not own firearms take on any of the risk that these other people are taking?
So to backwards man, the question was like, what do the gun manufacturers have the responsibility for? I guess the answer to that question is basically, I mean, maybe none. I mean, that's a great question, but like when it comes down to it, I'm not even talking about necessarily the gun manufacturers right now. I'm talking about like a literal barrier for even being able to like literally conduct evidentiary oversight on these industries. Like I'm not even like presenting evidence that proves that gun manufacturers are bad. I'm presenting evidence that suggests that we're having an information problem. We're having a lack of information problem. Like this is a fact. Like this is a fact.
I
Lady
agree.
by name.
I agree.
Lady by name, could you repeat your question? I'm sorry.
Why should if we're projecting that lawfully about 44% of people say there's a gun in their household, then why should the 56% of us who say we don't have a gun have to take on any of the financial burden or risk that these other people are taking? Because if somebody commits suicide, if somebody kills a bunch of people, we're all paying for it, but some of us aren't getting any benefit out of it.
Wait, how is everyone paying for it?
Because if somebody, if the Fed, because the state does sometimes like intervene in some of these issues. There's like bare minimum stuff they do for families and stuff. But when it comes to like criminals, I guess out here doing certain things and all that
Dylan,
jazz, the state will pick up the bill in certain cases so that the family won't have to deal with quite as much of a burden. And I'm saying some of us ain't involved in any of that.
I was just saying,
and that's all what and the people who are promoting to have the guns in the country, maybe why is the benefit? Why is the onus on us? If it's not going to be on the American people that are just owning the guns, then why wouldn't it be on the manufacturers? Like, who do you want to pay for the risk? Who's going to start research and development, and who's going to pay for all the fallout?
That's the entire point of the question, is that if you're providing the weapons, which are a threat to the general welfare of the public, how are you not responsible or have a general interest in the safety of that public in which you're providing those weapons?
I would say onto that question of like who is like who should be responsible
like
for all
the
this.
example
I
I
think
gave
like
earlier, Dylan,
when we're talking about a federal nationwide issue,
about the like
I think just it's
the
important
way
to have
to
a federal
demonstrate
agency
what
that
he's
can
saying
actually like look into these issues personally.
have-
Like
you would have
it's
to
not even that
have information on what
these
the
federal
proper
agencies
amount
are
of
going to like
funding
be
is,
perfect. And
and
I know
knowing
you
that
brought up
that
the point
number is
of like the
currently under
taxes and like, you know, we're
that.
paying taxes into the federal government, but we're not getting
You
any
can't just say in
benefit.
a
But like
vacuum
I think it could
that
benefit everyone if we know the source.
this is how much
of
they
the issue.
have.
Um,
I think
yes.
they should
But
have
but
more.
we're in,
But I feel like some of that funding should come from private actors, since they have the most
Some people
stake
say
in the
that
benefit
military is
of it.
underfunded.
So it shouldn't just
And
be
I don't
the
think
rest
so.
of us.
I don't
who aren't
disagree.
But
the
I
do not
benefits
disagree.
of-
prove it by just saying that
basically
that's a big number.
I get no benefit from the gun manufacturers, but I do know someone who I love dearly who is no longer here.
Yeah, and but basically the point of my question is that if it's the government's responsibility for the general welfare of the people, then they're responsible for allowing the corporations or manufacturers for even allowing to produce a threat to the general public to begin with. So why should the corporations not be held responsible in the general interest of the public in which they're providing those possible deadly weapons?
I think that's a
Very
great question.
minimum research, damn it.
Because
FML.
the general welfare clause, right, it supposedly, allegedly, empowers the federal government to do all kinds of crazy shit that was never enumerated in our country's constitution. But even if we go in that direction, it is an empowerment, an enumeration of authority for the government to do something, right, to provide something to citizens. It is not an enumeration of authority to compel private individuals or private organizations to fork out, operate safely, right, and use it in an illegal way. That's not. We can pervert the general welfare clause to all sorts of extents without going that far.
I feel like if they don't understand what the effect is going to be on the public that they're exposing to them. Why should they keep producing things if they don't have any any type of like responsibility to do research and figure out exactly what's going on?
Well,
maybe we
as
should
I
sue
noted
the
earlier,
miners for the like natural resources. Like you could keep backing this up. Like that doesn't there has to be some like statute of limitations on like degrees of separation that you can't no longer hold someone like accountable for something like that.
I think even then, Bam, we have, as I noted earlier, gun manufacturers are leading the way with the federal government in ensuring that people don't get access to guns that shouldn't have them, do not illegally possess them, updating the NCIC system that's used for background investigations. So the gun manufacturers are already involved in this space. They're already paying for the technology and the infrastructure to support it. They're already paying for different programs, social programs, right, to address gun violence. So I'm not understanding what we think is this absence of gun manufacturers participating here. It seems like we're kind of making it up.
I think we don't currently have like serial numbers or a particularly like good tracking system of guns because there's the idea that the government could come and take all our guns or something. But I think everyone's past that these days. Maybe they should make it way easier to figure out where all guns are and maybe start taking the old ones.
I don't think there's a way to
but
like
that's an example of gun control. That's not actually an argument for holding gun manufacturers responsible or liable for the illegal use of the safe legal product that they're producing.
If they're providing weapons, to general public, I think that they should legally have to have a vested interest in the general public's protection.
But why not the miners backwards? Like, what would you say that to the miners who sold the like natural resources that got turned into metal that got like sent to the gun manufacturer? Like
the gun manufacturers still turn that metal into a weapon that killed somebody.
But I'm saying
the metal didn't just turn into a gun and shoot someone.
The gun didn't turn. Like that's what I'm saying. Like
I mean, the metal didn't just turn into a gun and shoot someone.
Right.
And the gun didn't just on its own shoot somebody.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like I'm just walking it back another step. Like there's no difference between
the gun manufacturer didn't pull the trigger.
That's all that matters is that someone got injured by their product that they gave to the public, which was known to be a possible threat to the general public.
If you ate a piece of pizza and you choked on that pizza and died, could you sue, I don't know, the cheese company?
Pizza Hut.
Yeah, Pizza Hut.
Well, if my child ate a gumball and choked on it, I might.
Well, let's say a kid grabs a jawbreaker thinking that it's a gumball or something, right? And then he swallows that jawbreaker and suffocates to death. I'm like, what then?
I don't know. Sounds like
right now, there's like what?
And well, not even negligent parents. I feel like it's just a tragic situation.
Is that negligent parents or is that easy access of candy?
Well, no. The idea would be like, why would a kid be in an area with something dangerous unless the parent put them there? I think, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's something we have to recognize here is that despite there being 340 million guns in the United States, there are, less than 40,000 gun-involved killings and suicides, right? I mean, it's like 0.00035%, right? So are we really going to argue that gun manufacturers are specifically liable or responsible, right, when a product that they're producing is used 0.00035% of the time for a killing or for a suicide?
Nobody had
a response. So how far do we actually go in trying to actualize the risk when the risk is vanishingly small?
I mean, if you were to ask me, I do think that there is an incredible amount of guns manufacturing. I would say almost too much, and that this has caused a glut of weapons and made availability to like people because of the amount of weapons that this has made it incredibly easy and available to people who otherwise shouldn't have them.
It's a threat to the general
insanity.
public.
I think that's insanity to have what is it, 140 weapons per capita.
Generalized risk, right? Each of us here on this panel are the risk to us individually of being killed by a gun or even being the victim of a gun-related crime is infinitesimally small. I mean, it won't even be recorded on a pinhead. It is so small here in the United States. So if the argument is that gun manufacturers need to be on the hook because of a safety risk to individuals, well, that safety risk you can't even draw that on a piece of paper. It's so small, right? So what risk are we talking about?
I mean, so like let's quantify this. Let's quantify this.
I mean, high enough risk to happen to me.
What is the risk that you'll walk down a back alley in England and run into some people that you potentially don't run into? What is the chance of them pulling a gun on you? What is the chance of them pulling a gun on you in America? Hey, if you do encounter someone who has a weapon like a gun versus like a knife, what is the chances if you get shot that that it'll cause you death or serious injury? I don't know. With guns,
I think individually, when you have something enter your body and exit it, there is a decent chance that you'll probably be harmed enough to bleed out. But
the risk of that bullet entering your body, though, is I can't even get my fingers close enough to reflect.
You're talking about the numbers in the aggregate in a very statistical sense, but I'm saying if you're walking around a neighborhood that you know to be dangerous and you know have a lot of people with a lot of different guns, the risk that you walk into the wrong person is a bit higher.
Absolutely, no argument. In that area, though, that you know to be a higher risk of potential gun violence, right? Please explain how Remington or Bushmaster or Sig Sauer or anyone else is responsible for that risk being higher there. The risk isn't the presence of guns. The risk is the people that are there.
The idea is in 2021, in 2021, the company can do more to track the new types of firearms they're pushing out on the market. They can do more to do research on the types of deaths that are currently happening. They can do more to fund. I mean, like, if these companies, this is what I want to see. I want to see what is the percentage that the U.S. government is spending on this information, and what is the percentage of the budget of the companies, and compare the two. Because why are we paying for that? You know what I mean?
I just want to listen to answer like your question directly. I mean, like they have sold like millions of guns to the American people,
hundreds of millions
in the market, hundreds of millions, making a vastly increased chain of supply, making it easier for people who want guns to get them. That includes people who shouldn't have guns to get them. It's just the way the world works.
And here's the irony.
And then they rob people like me. Yeah.
Here is the irony in that. Despite selling hundreds of millions of firearms to American citizens, we have less than 40,000 homicides and suicides committed with guns. 339 million guns, 40,000 incidents. Now, break that out even to just generalized gun crime, right? It is still an infinitesimally small number.
Percentages, I'm more interested in the effect of the people who are now dead.
We have to deal with percentages.
The perps who committed the crime.
I mean, I like where your head's at.
We can't not deal with percentages. Like we can't just say that doesn't matter to the one person.
But I'm saying that there's a large amount of guns. This particular percentage, saying that there's a large amount of guns, is not as interesting as saying there are these people here who are now dead and their family members now have to deal with that.
Because another person chose to kill them.
Because of the access to weapons.
Our attention.
No matter what the person did, they're already dead. You can feel like that's a horrible person. I think it's a horrible person too. But we're still, whether or not that person might even be in prison, might not be in prison, but the family is still here burying their person in a cheap ass casket sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
you never know.
And as someone who almost took the bullet and ended up dead, I would like the manufacturers to be held accountable and my family be able to sue them.
Would you say that about car manufacturers? Like for elite, like people getting in a car crash for illegally drag racing? They like car manufacturers do not intend their products to be used for illegally drag racing. Some individual does it. They get in a car wreck. They die. Is it Ford's fault?
Yeah, though, in what instance does a car have a deadly application?
Cars kill way more people.
Yeah.
Not even close.
No.
Not the same. Not the same.
Yeah, traffic fatalities
They don't
outweigh.
they don't have a murder application, no.
Homicides
But neither do
samurai sword.
Guns don't have a murder application.
Pretty samurai sword, and then someone goes crazy and then stabs your mother. It's not technically the manufacturer's fault. No. Why did that person have a samurai sword if they're trying to kill people's moms? That's a good question. You can say that you don't want to charge the company, but I think if someone should be asking those questions, someone should do serious research on those questions. And I say, what's wrong with like forcing people to spend more money on those questions if we feel like the numbers of decrease aren't high enough? You know what I mean?
I don't think anybody's arguing we shouldn't. I think, to be honest, I think the burden is on you and others to demonstrate that gun manufacturers are not already involved in this space, whether it's through research or it's public campaigns or it's through helping law enforcement upgrade their NCIC database infrastructure, right, which they're already involved in every year, spending money on this.
But we're not talking about like.
I don't think there's any space of disagreement here in terms of having gun manufacturers involved. They already are.
How much money did I spend?
I have an investigators too. Am I the only one? Like, because
I think Fines had a great point.
Officers are bros.
Fines had a great point earlier.
How much money did I spend?
Gosh, I'm looking it up right now. That's actually over here on this screen. But Fines had an earlier point about the number of investigators looking at the FFLs. You know, it's the same argument we have over USDA inspectors, right, going in the food processing plants, right? We're always there's a sneeze test, and I think that's what Fines was getting to earlier. Look, we see only $300 million being spent on this. That just doesn't seem like a sufficient amount of money. And I would agree with them. That seems like a very low amount of money considering they have a $1.8 billion budget, right? So at least we can say, yeah, it doesn't pass the sneeze or smell test. There probably should be more inspectors. The ATF controls that, right? They can request funding from Congress, and Congress doesn't give that to them. Well, you know, there's budget is politics, and that's always going to be that way. But so I think Fines had a reasonable point earlier, even if the objective criteria wasn't met to prove it, right? It just doesn't pass the smell test.
So I wanted to ask you something, and I've been waiting quite a while.
I've been waiting here with you.
Yeah, and thank you for being so patient. So way back when, you talked about an imposition on the First Amendment, right? Like you were relating the Second Amendment to the First Amendment, and basically the right to vote as well, right? Saying that, as we, you know, like for many liberals, they would say that we shouldn't have restrictions on voting because the conservative argument, and I don't think it's oftentimes a genuine argument, but that's for a different day. But the conservative argument is that, well, there's legal voting, and we want to just put these restrictions in place to make sure that doesn't happen. And relating that to the Second Amendment, you're saying, well, people are saying, well, there are legal acts being done, and we want to put in restrictions to make sure that those things don't happen anymore. But I don't think these two things are equivalent simply because of the harm that's being done. One, there is not a mass of illegal voting. Like that's not a thing that's happening, right? But I would just say that doesn't actually occur.
Yeah,
And on the other side, we have documented
I have my
proof
concealed carry
of
permit, but
many dead individuals.
But I'm saying, like, I
from
would
the
be okay
illegal
with
use
that
of
being like
guns.
a national.
So putting in restrictions
level
for the guns makes more sense,
actual
and the consequences are, of course,
tests.
even more severe because of
But,
the immediate deaths that happen.
Like generally,
So that's why I'm fine
with guns.
Having different standards for these two different constitutional rights.
I just
Does that
think
make
it would
sense?
make people feel better about guns.
I think what I was trying
But,
to
yeah, like,
suggest earlier is that
I agree with you, Neil. This is
just
not really
like
the crux of the issue. It's not a
just like folks will argue
but it
against
just, sometimes you need to make laws that
rescinding
don't matter
voting rights
because
for
it makes
felons
the public
because
feel
voting is a
more
right
comfortable.
that we enjoy to participate in our democracy. We also have a Second
Oh, my
Amendment
bad.
right that we get to enjoy. It's limited in nature. And so consequently, we ought to be aware, right, of what gun control does, and that the additional gun control laws that usually pop up and become very popular following a mass shooting, right, these are retreads of what's already happening at the federal level and what's already happening at the state level. And to continue to impose more of those, despite their clear and consistent violation by mass shooters and consistent in the last 25, 30 years, you have to ask, well, what is that warranted? Is it going to resolve the mass shooting problem? And this is just one case area. And does the imposition of even more regulations on law-abiding citizens make sense if we're really trying to target bad actors, whoever those bad actors might be? Mass shooters, gangbangers, crimes of passion, perps, whatever. So I don't think there's much space between us on this.
Okay, I kind of maybe want to bring up a topic about the voting, but I don't know how much longer we're gonna stay on the gun topic.
Yeah. I want to finish up on this. But yeah, like, I think that because of the deadly consequences, just kind of it simply makes sense to apply these standards, right? Like, and we do that for anything, right? Where we look at the consequences of misuse, and we go, like, the consequences of misuse of a butter knife are usually not too bad, right? And so
I appreciate y'all for that. Actually, that means a lot.
of a gun, very easily a death, until we balance those, right? Misuse of a vote can also be quite tragic. I mean, it gave us Trump, but still, that was a cheap shot. I'm sorry, but still, it's not quite the same.
Well, just no prime that my point that I'm making isn't to repeal existing gun control laws or regulations. It's to recognize that additional gun control proposals are always landing on law-abiding citizens, right? They always land on law-abiding citizens, because we see that in most cases, mass shootings is a prime example of this, gun control laws are already being violated, particularly in the acquisition and possession of firearms. We've got the Operation Lipstick thing from several years ago, demonstrating that individuals who commit crimes with guns more often get their guns through straw purchases, right, than they do through illegal means. So they get it through an illegal acquisition process rather than a legal process. And so consequently, I mean, at what point do we stop imposing layer after layer on legal gun owners and actually start addressing straw purchases, or a variety of other ways that individuals illegally acquire guns that either state or federal government authorities are not enforcing?
FML, I agree with you, but I feel like, I don't know, I feel like this is an argument people only use for guns and don't apply to anything else. Yes, any law by definition is only going to impact law-abiding citizens, because people who don't listen to laws aren't impacted by laws. That's what all laws do. So although I agree with your premise that it's not addressing the issue, I just don't think that's the best argument of framing, but it's not. It's not saying you're being bad faith. I just know I hear this argument a lot when it comes to gun laws only hurt people who obey the laws. Like, well, yeah, all laws only hurt people who obey the laws.
That's a good point, but I think we're reasonable people and we can draw distinctions between laws against what we classify as murder and rape and sexual assault, right? Law-abiding people are not affected by those kinds of laws at all, right? On the other hand, we have a Second Amendment right to possess a firearm, and the vast, overwhelming majority of people who possess a firearm do so legally and never use it in the commission of crime. And any additional layer of gun control we want to lay on top of the current structure or gun control regime in the United States necessarily means we are directly impacting the ability of law-abiding citizens to purchase a product, right, that's legal.
Okay, yeah, I respect that that difference.
Okay, I think we. What? Sorry, did you have something?
I was going to say thanks for having me, but I think.
Okay. Thanks so much, everyone. I think we crushed this. So to my audience, we will be back tomorrow. We'll have Amazon Lily. All thanks to our friend Amanda Smash, and we thank her so much. She's an amazing human being. We love her. If you haven't done so yet, hit the follow button right now. Make sure the notifications are on. So now I'm going live. Hit that follow button right this second. Thanks so much for social and chat. Follow us on social media. Jump into our. I can't spell that. Okay, we'll try it again. Follow us on Twitter for channel updates. Jump into Discord.
Hold on. So long. Farewell to you, my friends. What's up, guys? Oh, that was about enough of that. I don't know the specific laws with that. I know that knives do like tons of damage in like really short. Like you can cover a lot of distance with a knife really fast, and you can do a lot of damage. I seen somebody like get cut by a box cutter, and it was like crazy. Yeah, it's like 2:30 a.m. here. Y'all don't know how much I appreciate y'all like hanging out with me this late at night. I know, well, I don't know what time it is where y'all at, but I know y'all got other stuff y'all could be doing. So this was another really fun stream. I'm glad I'm like starting to get involved with other people in the community, not because I don't want to like just chill, have like personal streams and talk to y'all, but just because I don't know, I think it's fun to network. It's fun to like reach out and meet new people, especially people who are like really prominent in these spaces. Yeah. Anyways, I guess I'm definitely about to end this. And yeah, I like ended up adding him as a friend. I'm gonna reach out and try to like, where I'm gonna like see if I can have some like what other things he cares about. Yeah, I'll definitely try to have a conversation to get him on stream. Yeah, y'all have a good rest of your night or day, wherever y'all at. I'm gonna go get some sleep. Appreciate y'all. Love y'all.